The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and crimson. A soft, cool breeze rustled the leaves of the ancient oak tree that stood sentinel over the quiet suburban street. Across the street, a young girl named Chloe, her blonde hair tied back in pigtails, walked her puppy, Sparky, a fluffy ball of golden fur, on a leash. Sparky, as if sensing the shift in atmosphere, barked playfully, his tail wagging with joyful abandon. Chloe chuckled, a warm feeling spreading through her chest. The world felt peaceful, almost idyllic. It was a world where the scars of past conflicts were slowly fading, replaced by a fragile, uneasy peace. For the past 2 decades, a global coalition known as the Global Defense Force (GDF) had been safeguarding Earth. They had successfully united a fractured world, pooling resources and expertise to create a united front against any potential threat from beyond the stars. It was a world that had learned the hard way that division and conflict only led to self-destruction. Chloe, like many children her age, grew up under the shadow of the GDF's watchful eye. It was a constant presence in their lives, a reassuring force that kept the nightmares of the past at bay. But it also meant a world where life was carefully curated, where the edges of possibility were carefully defined. As Chloe continued her walk, her eyes caught a flicker of movement on the horizon. A colossal, silver disk, unlike anything she had ever seen before, emerged from the clouds. It appeared to be slowly descending towards Earth, its vastness dwarfing everything on the ground. Chloe stopped, her breath catching in her throat, as the disk grew larger with every passing moment. Sparky, sensing Chloe's discomfort, whined and tugged at his leash, his playful demeanor replaced by apprehension. Chloe reassured him with a gentle pat on his head, her heart pounding in her chest. "Don't worry, Sparky," she whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. "It's all right." But deep down, a sense of unease crept into Chloe's mind. It was as if the comfortable rhythm of her world was being disrupted, replaced by a chilling uncertainty. A news bulletin crackled through the airwaves, confirming what Chloe had witnessed. A massive spacecraft, dubbed the Celestial Harbinger, had entered Earth's atmosphere, its origins and intentions unknown. The GDF was scrambling to make contact, while the world watched with a mix of awe and trepidation. The newscast went on to describe the Celestial Harbinger as a marvel of technological advancement, unlike anything ever seen before. Its sheer size dwarfed even the largest human spacecraft, and its smooth, metallic exterior seemed to reflect the surrounding skies, making it appear almost ethereal. As the sun descended further, casting long shadows across the street, the Celestial Harbinger hovered above the city, its silent presence a chilling reminder of the unknown. Chloe clung tightly to Sparky, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that something had irrevocably shifted, that life as they knew it would never be the same again. The world was on the cusp of change, and Chloe, an innocent young girl walking her puppy on a quiet suburban street, was about to be thrust into the heart of it. The calm before the storm had given way to an unsettling silence, a silence that held a whisper of things to come. The future, filled with both wonder and fear, was now just a few breaths away. Chloe skipped along the sidewalk, her brown hair bouncing with each step. Sparky, her energetic golden retriever puppy, bounded ahead, tugging on his leash with joyous enthusiasm. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of blooming honeysuckle and the distant rumble of the Global Defense Force's jets patrolling the skies. It was a strange time for peace. The world had just emerged from a series of regional conflicts, each fueled by resource scarcity and political tensions. The Global Defense Force, a collective effort of the world's nations, had finally established a fragile equilibrium. A sense of unease still hung in the air, a lingering fear that the fragile peace could shatter at any moment. Chloe was oblivious to the world's anxieties. She lived in a small, quiet town where the most pressing concern was the annual bake-off. For her, the world was a bright, playful place, a canvas upon which she painted her childhood dreams. Sparky, a mischievous bundle of fur and boundless energy, suddenly stopped, his ears perked up. He let out a sharp bark, then another, pointing his nose towards the horizon. Chloe, confused, followed his gaze. She saw it then, a colossal, metallic disk hovering in the sky, eclipsing the sun. It was unlike any aircraft she had ever seen, impossibly large, radiating a chilling blue light that cast long, menacing shadows on the ground. Fear, a cold and sharp sensation, gripped Chloe's heart. Her playful demeanor vanished, replaced by a paralyzing terror. Sparky, sensing her unease, whimpered and pulled back, burying his head in her leg. A collective gasp rippled through the town. People emerged from their homes, their faces etched with a mixture of awe and dread. The monstrous ship, the celestial harbinger, it was later coined, continued its descent, slowly, ominously, towards Earth. Chloe, hand trembling, clutched Sparky's leash tighter. The ship seemed to be coming down near the fields just outside her town, a place where she often walked Sparky. She had a sudden urge to run, to hide, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. Then, a blinding flash of light. The ship, still hundreds of meters in the air, unleashed a blinding beam, illuminating the sky and bathing the town in an eerie blue glow. Chloe shielded her eyes, instinctively drawing Sparky closer. She heard the terrified cries of her neighbors, the frantic barking of dogs, the distant sirens of emergency vehicles. The world seemed to fall apart around her. The light faded. Chloe lowered her hand and looked up. Now, hanging in the air, were several smaller crafts, descending from the mother ship. These ships were sleek and elongated, their surfaces shimmering with a metallic sheen. They landed gently on the field, almost soundlessly, throwing dust and debris into the air. The doors of the crafts slid open, revealing figures unlike anything Chloe had ever imagined. They were tall and slender, almost insectoid, their bodies covered in a chitinous exoskeleton. They had 8 segmented limbs, ending in sharp, pointed claws. Their faces, hidden beneath a mask of chitin, bore 2 large, multifaceted eyes that glowed with an unsettling luminescence. One of the creatures stepped out of the craft. It raised a long, spindly arm towards the stunned crowd. Its voice, a high-pitched, crackling sound, echoed through the town. "Greetings, humans. We come in peace. We are the Xy'lar, and we have come to guide your species to a brighter future." Chloe, overwhelmed by fear and confusion, clung to Sparky. The Xy'lar's words, echoing through the valley, were barely audible above the rising tide of panic. Her gaze, drawn by an instinct she couldn't understand, landed on the creature's eyes, those unsettling, glowing orbs that seemed to pierce through her soul. Then, Sparky, sensing the alien presence, let out a sudden, sharp bark. The creature, startled by the noise, turned its glowing eyes towards the puppy. The Xy'lar's voice, now filled with a chilling, unfamiliar anger, crackled through the air. "Silence!" It raised a weapon, a device that hummed with an ominous energy. Chloe, fearing for Sparky's safety, screamed, "No, don't!" The creature, without hesitation, fired. A bolt of energy, a beam of pure, concentrated light, lanced through the air. It struck Sparky, and the world seemed to freeze for a timeless second. Chloe, still screaming, felt a sharp pain in her heart. She saw Sparky, her beloved puppy, collapse on the ground, his body twitching, then still. The scent of burnt fur filled the air. The Xy'lar, unfazed by the girl's anguish, turned back to the crowd, their voice cold and indifferent. "The Xy'lar do not tolerate threats. Your species will learn to respect our authority. Now, listen closely, humans." Chloe, however, had stopped listening. Her mind, filled with a white-hot rage, refused to comprehend the Xy'lar's words. She saw only the lifeless body of her puppy, a victim of their callous indifference. As the Xy'lar continued their pronouncements, the world around her began to blur. It was then Chloe realized, with a horrifying clarity, that this was no peaceful encounter. This was the beginning of something far more sinister, something that would change the course of human history forever. The world simmered, a crucible of simmering resentment. Images of Chloe, her tear-streaked face framed by the stark backdrop of the alien ship, were splashed across every screen, every newsfeed. Sparky, the puppy, became a global martyr, a symbol of the Xy'lar's callous cruelty. They killed a dog, a woman on the street wailed, clutching a poster of Sparky's smiling face. "Just a dog. What kind of monsters do you have to be to do that?" The sentiment echoed across continents, translating into every language, every dialect. The Xy'lar, once seen as potential saviors, were now demonized, their advanced technology a chilling reminder of their unyielding power. But amidst the chaos, a different story was brewing. In a secluded lab, tucked away within a remote research facility, a scientist named Dr. Anya Petrova was immersed in a world of her own making. Her world was devoid of the noise, the fear, the anger that consumed the outside. Here, in the sterile confines of her lab, she was building a weapon that she believed could, in a twisted, ironic way, save them all. Anya was a prodigy, a mind that operated on a different frequency. Her theories were considered outlandish, her ideas too radical for the mainstream scientific community. She had been ostracized, ridiculed, her brilliance dismissed as the ramblings of a madwoman. But Anya was undeterred. She knew what she had seen, what she had witnessed during her time studying the Xy'lar through the limited data available. She understood their biology, their reliance on the chitinous exoskeletons that encased their bodies, their weakness, frequencies. "They're delicate," she muttered, tracing a diagram on a whiteboard with a marker, her brow furrowed in intense concentration. "Their nervous systems are incredibly sensitive to certain frequencies they can't even perceive. But we can." It was a gamble, a Hail Mary pass thrown into the unknowable abyss of alien biology. But Anya was willing to take the risk. She had to. Because if she was right, if her weapon worked, it could be their only chance. Her lab was a testament to her dedication. A labyrinth of equipment and wires, the air thick with the smell of ozone and burning circuits. She worked tirelessly, fueled by a mix of desperation and determination. The world outside was spiraling into chaos, but for Anya, there was only the relentless hum of machinery, the comforting click of keys, the reassuring glow of monitors. She had dubbed her creation the Requiem. It was not a weapon of traditional destruction, not a nuke or a missile. It was a symphony of frequencies, a carefully crafted chorus of tones and vibrations, designed to exploit the Xy'lar's biological vulnerability. "It's not about killing," she murmured to herself, her voice barely a whisper. "It's about incapacitating, about giving us a fighting chance." Her voice was tinged with sadness, with a deep understanding of the terrible price that might have to be paid. But Anya was not a pacifist. She was a scientist, a pragmatist who understood the harsh realities of survival. She had seen the face of the Xy'lar, the blank, unfeeling eyes that had looked upon Sparky as nothing more than an annoyance. She knew the kind of enemy they were facing, and she knew that they could not afford to be merciful. The Requiem was not a weapon of hate. It was a weapon of necessity, and in a world teetering on the brink of annihilation, necessity had a cruel way of demanding its own. The sky, once a familiar canvas of blues and whites, warped and contorted. A growing, pulsating mass of crimson and gold, an impossible shape defying the laws of physics, devoured the horizon. It was a spectacle of cosmic terror, a monstrous birth from the void, and the silence, the hushed anticipation of the world, was almost as unnerving as the spectacle itself. The Global Defense Force, once a symbol of earthly unity, was now a fragile shield against the unknown. Their most advanced radar systems, designed for tracking rogue asteroids and rogue nations, were rendered useless against the behemoth that now hung over them. It pulsed with an inner light, a heartbeat of raw power that thrummed through the very earth beneath their feet. Dr. Anya Petrova, the scientist ostracized for her unconventional theories, watched the alien arrival from the research facility in the Nevada desert. Her eyes, usually bright and filled with boundless curiosity, were now shadowed by a deep, unsettling anxiety. The world was about to be irrevocably changed, and she, with her ostracized theories about alien life, held a key to the unraveling mystery. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" A voice, soft and almost childlike, broke the silence. It was young Chloe, her face a mixture of awe and fear, her small hand clutching the leash of her golden retriever, Sparky. "Not beautiful, Chloe," Anya corrected, her voice tight with a strange mix of emotions. It's terrifying. The sky, now completely occupied by the monstrous, alien vessel, began to ripple. It was as if the very fabric of reality was being stretched and distorted, a gateway to something beyond human comprehension opening before their eyes. A deafening roar, like a symphony of thunder and shattered glass, echoed across the globe. From the belly of the celestial harbinger, a smaller craft, sleek and silver, detached itself and began its descent. It was a breathtaking spectacle of technology, a testament to a power far exceeding anything humanity had ever conceived. As the craft landed in a barren field near the Nevada desert, a hush fell over the world. Billions watched with bated breath, their hearts pounding in their chests, a mixture of dread and morbid fascination filling their souls. The doors of the craft creaked open, revealing a scene that would forever alter the course of human history. They were not the towering, humanoid figures of science fiction. They were unlike anything humanity had ever imagined, an unsettling blend of organic and metallic, their bodies a chitinous exoskeleton of jade and bronze. 8 segmented limbs, each tipped with a sharp, needle-like appendage, moved with a fluid grace that was both mesmerizing and unnerving. Each face, a segmented mask with large, multifaceted eyes, gazed upon humanity with an air of detached superiority. The leader stepped forward, his voice a series of clicks and whistles, translated by the Global Defense Force's hastily assembled linguistic program. "Greeting, inhabitants of Earth," the alien leader declared. "We are the Xy'lar, and we come in peace." The world held its breath. The Xy'lar, a race with technology beyond human comprehension, had come to Earth. Was this a peaceful encounter, a chance for human advancement? Or was it the beginning of the end? Anya felt a shiver run down her spine. She couldn't help but feel that the Xy'lar's opening statement, their declaration of peace, rang hollow. There was something in their posture, in the way they observed humanity, that spoke of a quiet, chilling arrogance. As if sensing her apprehension, Chloe tugged at Anya's hand, her voice filled with a childish curiosity. "What are they going to do?" "We'll find out, Chloe," Anya said, her voice strained, her eyes glued to the Xy'lar. "Just stay close to me." But even as she spoke, the world was about to be plunged into a darkness far deeper than any they had ever known. Sparky, the golden retriever, uncharacteristically silent until now, began to bark. A deep, resonant sound, filled with the primal fear of an unknown threat. The Xy'lar, their attention diverted by the unexpected sound, turned their heads towards the source of the noise. Their multifaceted eyes, flickering with an unsettling light, focused on Chloe and her dog. For a moment, there was an eerie silence. Then, one of the Xy'lar, his needle-like limb extended, fired. The world, frozen in anticipation of a first contact, was plunged into a scream of horror. Chloe, her eyes wide with terror, watched as Sparky, her companion, her friend, slumped to the ground, a crimson stain blooming on his white fur. The silence that followed was even more chilling than the sound of the gunshot. The Xy'lar, their faces expressionless, watched Chloe's reaction with what seemed like detached curiosity. They had not intended to harm the girl, but their logic, their understanding of the world, was so alien, so different from human comprehension, that they had mistaken the dog's instinctive fear for a threat. Chloe's screams, filled with grief and rage, echoed across the desolate landscape. They were not the screams of a child, but the roar of humanity's soul, the primal cry of a species suddenly awakened to a terrible, terrifying truth. The Xy'lar had come in peace, but their peace was built upon a foundation of misunderstanding, a chilling indifference to the value of life, a cold, calculating logic that knew nothing of compassion or empathy. The Xy'lar had come in peace, but their arrival had ignited a fire in the hearts of humanity, a fire that would consume the world, a fire that would forever change the destiny of both species. The celestial harbinger, a colossal vessel the size of a small moon, hung heavy in the sky, a monstrous shadow blotting out the sun. It pulsed with a soft, humming light, a rhythm that thrummed through the earth, unsettling in its alienness. The world held its breath, a silent audience to this strange celestial spectacle. Across the globe, news channels blared, spewing a cacophony of speculation and fear. The Global Defense Force, the world's last bastion of unity, maintained a cautious silence. No one understood the nature of the vessel, its origins, or its intentions. The world was a tinderbox, waiting for a spark to ignite its anxieties. That spark arrived in the form of a slender, metallic craft, detaching from the Harbinger and descending towards Earth with an ethereal grace. It landed with a soft thud, dissipating a cloud of dust as it settled on a vast, open field miles outside of a small town in rural Montana. A hush fell over the gathered crowd of soldiers, scientists, and journalists. Cameras flashed, lenses straining to capture the moment. The door of the craft slid open, revealing a figure that defied all expectations. It wasn't a towering humanoid, nor a sleek, reptilian creature. It was an insectoid, a being with a chitinous exoskeleton that shimmered with a metallic sheen. Its 8 segmented limbs ended in sharp, pincer-like appendages. Its head was a bulbous mass, antennae twitching as it scanned the assembled crowd. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Whispers erupted, questioning the intentions of this strange, alien visitor. The creature lifted its head, a series of clicks and whistles emanating from its mouth, a language beyond human comprehension. Then, a voice filled the air. Not a spoken word, but a series of psychic impressions, thoughts directly implanted into the minds of the humans. The Xy'lar, as they called themselves, were here to guide humanity. They had observed Earth for centuries, and they had seen its potential. They had seen its flaws, its destructive urges. They were here, with their superior technology, to steer humanity towards a brighter future. The Xy'lar, through their telepathic communication, spoke of their advanced civilization, of their mastery over technology and knowledge. They spoke of their benevolence, their altruism, their desire to help humanity reach its full potential. They spoke of a world free from war, disease, and famine, a world where human ingenuity would flourish under their guidance. A wave of relief washed over the crowd. Fear morphed into hope. Some, the more cynical among them, remained skeptical, but a majority saw this as an opportunity, a chance to elevate humanity, to finally escape the cycle of conflict and destruction that seemed ingrained in their species. The Xy'lar, with their sophisticated technology and telepathic communication, seemed almost godlike. Their presence was awe-inspiring, their message seductive. But beneath the sheen of their words, a darker truth lurked, a truth that would soon be revealed. The Xy'lar, with their chitinous exoskeletons and 8 segmented limbs, descended from their ship, moving with an uncanny fluidity. They were met with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Some people reached out, hesitant, as if trying to understand the physical presence of these telepathic beings. One young girl, Chloe, approached the Xy'lar with her tiny brown puppy, Sparky. He was a scruffy mutt, full of energy and enthusiasm, always eager to make new friends. As Chloe drew closer, Sparky caught a glimpse of the Xy'lar, his tail wagging excitedly. His bark, a small, playful sound, echoed through the field. The Xy'lar, startled by the noise, turned towards the puppy, their antennae twitching nervously. Their psychic impressions faltered, replaced by a primal fear. To the Xy'lar, the bark was a sign of aggression, a threat. Their alien senses, tuned to the subtle nuances of their own species' communication, failed to decipher the innocent intention behind the simple bark. In that moment, the Xy'lar reacted with a terrifying swiftness. They raised their pincer-like appendages, targeting the puppy. A beam of energy, invisible to human eyes, erupted from their limbs, striking Sparky with an explosive force. Chloe watched in horror as her beloved pet was vaporized in a flash of light. Her screams, raw and untamed, tore through the air, a sound that would echo through the years, a symbol of the Xy'lar's brutal mistake. The crowd stood frozen, their hopes shattered, replaced by a deep, primal rage. The Xy'lar, their initial intentions seemingly noble, had just committed an act of unthinkable violence. They had killed a puppy, a symbol of innocence, a being so utterly insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe. And in that moment, humanity's fear turned into fury. The seeds of rebellion were sown, and they would soon blossom into a storm that would engulf the Xy'lar and change the course of history forever. The world, as Chloe knew it, shattered in a horrifying instant. There she was, a mere 10 years old, her small hand clasped around Sparky's leash, the golden retriever puppy bounding ahead, his tail wagging a joyous symphony against the crisp autumn air. Sparky was new to Chloe's life, a furry ball of unconditional love that had filled her days with playful barks and sloppy kisses. The landing site was a few blocks away, a looming monument of alien technology that had captivated the world for weeks. It stood as a silent giant against the azure sky, its metallic hull shimmering like 1,000 suns. Chloe had been told to stay away, to avoid the danger zone, but curiosity, fueled by the promise of something extraordinary, had lured her closer. Sparky, oblivious to the tension that hung heavy in the air, had reached the edge of the cordoned-off area, his nose twitching with excitement at the unfamiliar scents. Chloe tugged on the leash, a playful reprimand escaping her lips, but before she could reel him back, a chorus of shrieks echoed from the landing site. The ground beneath her feet trembled as an unearthly roar tore through the air, forcing her to shield her ears. Sparky, startled, let out a yelp, instinctively snapping his jaw at the invisible source of the noise. It was a bark, a primal, instinctive response to the world's sudden shift, a sound that was lost in the cacophony of the alien technology. Chloe looked up, her heart pounding against her ribs, her gaze drawn to the landing site. The alien, the one that had spoken to the world, the one that boasted of its superior knowledge and wisdom, raised a weapon that glinted ominously in the sunlight. Then, the world erupted in a blinding flash of light. The shriek of metal against metal, the crackle of energy, and the smell of ozone engulfed Chloe in a horrifying tableau. Sparky, caught in the crossfire, was thrown back, his whimpering turning into a choked gasp, his once vibrant golden fur now stained with crimson. Chloe stumbled backward, her legs giving way beneath her. The ground, once solid beneath her feet, felt like quicksand, sucking her down into a bottomless pit of despair. She reached out, her tiny hand trembling, trying to grasp at Sparky, but he was beyond her reach, his life draining away with each ragged breath. Then came the silence. A silence so profound, so deafening, that it felt like the world itself had stopped breathing. Chloe, frozen in a state of shock, watched as the alien creature turned to face her, its 8 segmented limbs twitching with a chilling sense of indifference. A threat, the alien's voice, a rasping, guttural sound that sent shivers down her spine, resonated through the air. Terminated. Chloe's eyes, wide with horror, locked onto the alien's icy gaze. In that moment, all the wonder and awe she had felt towards the Xy'lar evaporated, replaced by a burning rage that consumed her. The Xy'lar, the supposed saviors of humanity, had just murdered Sparky, a defenseless puppy who had only barked out of fear. He was a symbol of innocence, a tiny spark of joy in a world teetering on the edge of chaos, and they had snuffed him out with a callous indifference that sent chills down her spine. Sparky was gone. Gone because the Xy'lar, in their arrogance and ignorance, couldn't understand the simple language of a puppy's bark. Gone because they had decided that human life, no matter how small or insignificant, was expendable. Chloe, a small figure in the face of overwhelming power, rose to her feet, her gaze unwavering. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew this: she wouldn't be silenced. She wouldn't be ignored. She would be the voice of the voiceless, the symbol of the innocent lost, and she would make sure the world remembered the ashes of innocence. The Xy'lar, in their blind arrogance, had ignited a fire in her heart. A fire that would burn bright, a fire that would engulf the world, a fire that would consume the Xy'lar and their dreams of domination. The world had seen the Xy'lar's true face, and it would never be the same. The news of Sparky's death rippled through the globe like a tsunami, leaving a wake of shock and fury. It was no longer a news story. It was a collective wound, a raw, open gash in the collective human spirit. The Xy'lar, the beings who had arrived with a promise of guidance and a facade of peaceful intentions, had become overnight symbols of inhuman brutality. The world, once tentatively accepting their presence, erupted in a cacophony of rage. Chloe, the little girl who had witnessed the atrocity, found herself thrust into the center of this global storm. The image of her tear-streaked face, clutching Sparky's lifeless body, plastered across every news channel, became a rallying cry for a humanity united in grief and defiance. In the bustling city of London, a once peaceful demonstration in front of the Xy'lar embassy turned violent. The crowd, a mixture of young and old, their faces etched with shared anger, pushed against the barricade, chanting slogans against the Xy'lar. "They killed a puppy." "No more Xy'lar," their cries echoed through the streets, a chorus of righteous fury. Across the globe, a similar scene unfolded. Tokyo, Paris, New York, Rio de Janeiro, humanity was rising in protest, the death of a puppy becoming a universal symbol of the Xy'lar's true nature. The unified wave of outrage forced governments to respond. The Global Defense Force, once a symbol of peaceful cooperation, was now stretched thin. Their leaders, accustomed to managing disputes and diplomatic tensions, found themselves facing a global uprising fueled by raw, unbridled emotion. The Xy'lar, stunned by the sudden shift in public sentiment, were ill-prepared for such an outburst of human wrath. Their attempts at damage control, through their envoys, fell on deaf ears. They tried to explain, their 8 segmented limbs frantically gesturing, their chitinous skin shimmering under the harsh glare of the city lights, that Sparky's death had been a tragic mistake. But the world was no longer listening. The Xy'lar were seen as the enemy, and no explanation could soothe the burning rage of a world that had lost its faith in them. Chloe, meanwhile, sat in the sterile confines of a hospital room, her body bruised and her spirit battered. The news was a blur of flashing lights and distorted voices as reporters constantly circled her room, eager for a soundbite from the girl who had become the face of the resistance. She longed for the peace of her own home, for the warmth of her family, but the world was in chaos, and she was its unwilling focal point. But even in her pain and exhaustion, Chloe saw glimpses of hope. Her story had ignited a fire in the hearts of millions, a fire that burned against the coldness of the Xy'lar. The world was no longer divided by borders, political ideologies, or cultural differences. It was unified by a shared grief and a desperate need to protect its own. The Xy'lar, once seen as invincible, were now vulnerable. The world had finally woken up. And within this awakening, a new era was dawning. The era of human defiance. The news of Sparky's death was like a crack in the Earth's fragile peace, a fissure that spread across the globe in a matter of hours. It wasn't just the tragedy itself, the senseless killing of a small, harmless creature, but the way it happened, cold, calculating, devoid of any empathy. The Xy'lar, with their advanced technology and pronouncements of guiding humanity, had shown their true nature, one of unyielding brutality and callous disregard for all that wasn't Xy'lar. Chloe's screams, captured on a bystander's phone and uploaded to the internet before they even knew what had happened, became a chilling soundtrack to the world's dawning horror. The video went viral, spreading like a wildfire across every social media platform, every news outlet, every corner of the internet. Her face, etched with grief and disbelief, became the face of humanity's fear. The Xy'lar, who had arrived with fanfare and promises of a brighter future, were suddenly seen for what they truly were: invaders, conquerors, and, most importantly, murderers. The world erupted. Protests erupted in the streets of every major city, fueled by a primal rage that knew no boundaries. Flags of nations, once symbols of division, were now united in their shared defiance. The Global Defense Force, previously tasked with protecting humanity from external threats, was now thrust into the role of peacekeeping, struggling to maintain order amidst the chaos. Chloe's story became a rallying cry. She was a symbol of innocence, of the very thing the Xy'lar had so thoughtlessly snuffed out. From a small-town girl, she became a global figure, her name echoing in every language, her image plastered on every screen. The loss of Sparky, a creature so small and insignificant in the grand scheme of things, became a testament to the Xy'lar's callous disregard for life. The Xy'lar, caught off guard by the intensity of the human response, tried to downplay the incident. They claimed it was an unfortunate accident, a miscalculation, a misunderstanding. They spoke of their advanced technology, of the complexities of their weaponry, of the need for a swift, decisive response to any perceived threat. They offered apologies, condolences, expressions of regret. But their words rang hollow, their pronouncements drowned out by the roar of global outrage. The world, for the first time in years, was truly united. Governments that had long been at odds put aside their differences. Nationalism, once a source of strife, was replaced by a common enemy, a shared sense of fear and fury. The global coalition that had been formed to manage Earth's defenses after the last global conflict, though fractured and ineffective, was now thrust back into action, tasked with the seemingly impossible task of unifying the world against a common enemy. The Xy'lar had, in their arrogance, brought humanity together. The world was now looking at them not with awe or curiosity, but with a burning hatred. The line had been crossed, the threshold breached. They had awakened a dormant rage, a primal instinct for survival, a united front against a common enemy. And in the midst of this global storm, Chloe remained a beacon of hope, a symbol of defiance, a girl who had lost a puppy, but had gained a voice that resonated across the world. Her grief was a testament to the Xy'lar's brutality, her story a call to arms. The world was watching, and they were waiting for the moment when they would rise up and fight back, when they would show the Xy'lar the true meaning of human strength, the true cost of their arrogance. The world held its breath. The Xy'lar's attack on Sparky, the puppy, had sparked a wildfire of outrage. The initial shock and disbelief had morphed into a seething, collective rage. From the bustling streets of Tokyo to the quiet villages of the Amazon, the message was the same: we will not be subjugated, we will not be ruled, we will fight. Chloe, the girl whose life had been irrevocably altered by the Xy'lar's actions, became the unwilling symbol of this global upheaval. Her tear-streaked face, the raw grief in her eyes, was plastered on every news channel, a haunting reminder of the Xy'lar's brutality. Her story, told and retold in countless languages, resonated with a primal fear and a burning desire for retribution. Governments, once hesitant and divided, began to coalesce into a unified force. The Global Defense Force, once tasked with maintaining Earth's fragile peace, now found itself at the forefront of a global war. Military leaders, accustomed to strategic planning and diplomatic maneuvers, were forced to confront the terrifying reality of an alien invasion. The Xy'lar, confident in their technological superiority, had underestimated the ferocity of human resolve. Their initial efforts to quell the uprising were met with fierce resistance. They had expected fear and submission, but instead, they found a planet united in its hatred. The scientists and engineers, the minds behind humanity's technological advancements, were now dedicated to a singular purpose: defeating the Xy'lar. Labs buzzed with activity, fueled by a frantic urgency. The fear of another Sparky, another act of senseless violence, was a constant driving force. Dr. Anya Petrova, a brilliant but ostracized scientist, found herself thrust into the spotlight. Her theories, once dismissed as fringe and impractical, were now being scrutinized with a newfound respect. She had always believed that human ingenuity could surpass anything the Xy'lar could offer, and now her chance to prove it had arrived. Anya worked tirelessly, driven by a fierce sense of justice and a deep-seated anger at the Xy'lar's arrogance. She was determined to create a weapon, a tool that would exploit the Xy'lar's reliance on their chitinous exoskeletons, a weapon that would make them vulnerable, make them fear. The world held its breath, watching as Anya and her team, a ragtag group of scientists and engineers united by a common purpose, toiled day and night. They were driven by a primal need to protect their home, their loved ones, their very existence. The Xy'lar, meanwhile, were caught in a web of their own making. Their initial arrogance had blinded them to the true nature of the threat they faced. They had expected to be greeted with awe and reverence, but instead they were met with a tide of hatred and fury. The Xy'lar general, a creature of cold intelligence and calculated brutality, struggled to comprehend the ferocity of the human response. He had dispatched his forces to quell the uprising, expecting swift and decisive victories. Instead, he found himself facing a tide of human defiance, a force that refused to be broken. The world was now a battlefield, a tapestry of hope and fear, courage and despair. The Xy'lar, once seen as an invincible force, were now seen as vulnerable, as fallible. Humanity, united in its grief and its anger, was rising up to meet the challenge. The stage was set. The final act was about to begin. The world would know if it could truly stand against the Xy'lar, or if it would succumb to their ruthless advance. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and the answer would be written in the blood and tears of 1,000 battles. The world held its breath, waiting for the Xy'lar's response. Their arrogance, their callous disregard for human life, had ignited a firestorm of fury across the globe. The death of Sparky, the little puppy, had become a symbol, a rallying cry. It wasn't just the loss of an animal, it was the loss of innocence, the loss of a future where peace might be possible. The Xy'lar's response was swift and brutal. They deployed their forces, not in a measured, strategic manner, but in a wave of unbridled aggression. Their massive, metallic ships, resembling grotesque insects, buzzing across the sky, rained down destruction on cities and military bases. Their weapons, powered by an unknown energy source, carved a path of devastation through human infrastructure. Chloe, huddled in the makeshift shelter beneath the charred remains of her home, listened to the explosions shaking the ground. The news on the makeshift radio, powered by a car battery, was grim. The Xy'lar were relentless, their advance unstoppable. Governments were collapsing, armies were surrendering, and the world was falling into a terrifying new reality. But amidst the chaos, something else was happening. A spirit of resistance was taking root. People were tired of being victims, tired of being controlled. From the ashes of defeat, something new was being born. Chloe's story, her heartbreaking account of Sparky's death, had been broadcast around the world. Her tears, her anger, her call for justice had resonated with millions. People saw themselves in her, their own grief and rage mirrored by the young girl. And so, Chloe, a symbol of this newfound human spirit, became a beacon in the darkness. Her image was plastered on buildings, her voice broadcast on underground radio networks. She was the voice of the resistance, a symbol of defiance in the face of overwhelming force. Meanwhile, Dr. Petrova, the scientist ostracized for her unorthodox theories, was working tirelessly in a hidden laboratory. Her days were consumed by calculations, experiments, and sleepless nights, driven by a fierce determination to create the weapon that could turn the tide of the war. Her weapon was based on her theory that the Xy'lar's reliance on their chitinous exoskeletons, a source of strength and resilience, could also be their weakness. She developed a frequency, a specific vibration, that could disrupt the molecular bonds of the Xy'lar's shell, causing it to weaken and eventually crumble. Petrova had faced ridicule and rejection from the scientific community for years, her theories dismissed as wild speculation. But now, with the world on the brink of collapse, her genius was finally recognized. She was given the resources, the manpower, and the freedom to prove her theory. She worked with relentless dedication, fueled by an unshakable faith in her vision. She knew that this weapon was humanity's last hope. She was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. As Petrova hunched over her workbench, the world outside was collapsing around her. The Xy'lar's advance was relentless, their firepower overwhelming. But within the hidden laboratory, a different kind of fight was taking place, a fight for survival, a fight for a future where humanity could reclaim its fate. The world was on the brink, but even in the darkest hour, a flicker of hope remained. And in the hearts of millions, the spirit of defiance was taking hold. The hammer of resistance was slowly being raised, ready to strike back against the Xy'lar and defend the very essence of humanity. The world had been turned upside down. The news, once filled with the mundane weather reports, stock market fluctuations, and celebrity gossip, was now a cacophony of anger and fear. Every channel, every radio station, every social media feed was dominated by images of Sparky, the puppy, lying lifeless on the asphalt, its once playful eyes forever closed. Chloe's story had become a global phenomenon. From a shy, unassuming girl, she was thrust into the spotlight. her image plastered on billboards, banners, and news broadcasts. Her tears, her screams of anguish, had ignited something within the human spirit, a raw, primal rage that resonated with the collective grief of a planet. The Xy'lar, in their arrogance, had underestimated the power of human emotion. They had expected to be met with awe and subservience, but their callous act had backfired spectacularly. Fear, yes, but fear laced with a potent cocktail of anger, sorrow, and determination. It was this volatile mix that birthed the resistance. It began in whispers, in hushed conversations in darkened corners, in forums and chat rooms hidden behind layers of encryption. It started with individuals, a handful of brave souls who refused to accept the Xy'lar's tyranny. A group of veterans, their faces etched with the scars of past wars, met in a forgotten warehouse. A team of hackers, their fingers dancing across keyboards, infiltrated the Xy'lar's communication network. A lone scientist, ostracized for his unconventional theories, toiled in his basement laboratory, fueled by a burning desire to protect his species. Chloe, despite her grief, found herself drawn to this nascent rebellion. The initial shock of Sparky's death had given way to a simmering rage, and she knew she couldn't just sit back and watch as the Xy'lar destroyed everything she loved. She joined a group of young activists, their makeshift banners emblazoned with the image of a puppy and the words, "Never again." They organized protests, distributed flyers, and spread the message of defiance against the Xy'lar occupation. As the resistance grew, Chloe's voice became a rallying cry. She gave interviews, spoke at rallies, and shared her story with the world. She wasn't a charismatic leader, not a soldier or a politician, but her innocence, her vulnerability, her sheer humanity touched people in a way that no politician or general ever could. She reminded them of what was at stake, of what they were fighting for, of the humanity they were defending. The Xy'lar, in their ignorance, tried to quell the resistance with brute force. They deployed their troops, armed with weapons that seemed to defy even the laws of physics, to disperse crowds and silence dissent. But the more they tried to repress, the more the resistance grew. The brutality they unleashed only solidified the resolve of the human population. They underestimated the resilience of the human spirit. The Xy'lar, with their advanced technology and their smug sense of superiority, had failed to comprehend the simple truth. When you threaten something precious, you ignite a fire that burns with an intensity that can only be extinguished through complete annihilation. The world was on the brink. The Xy'lar, with their technological edge and their arrogance, had underestimated the power of human unity. The spark of rebellion had been ignited, and it was spreading like wildfire across the globe. It was a fire that would change the course of history. The world was aflame, not with physical fire, but with the raw, incandescent fury of a billion hearts beating in unison. From the bustling metropolises to the remotest villages, humanity was rising, a tide of defiance surging against the tide of Xy'lar oppression. Chloe, no longer just a girl, but a symbol, was at the heart of this storm. Her small frame, once fragile, now radiated a resilience that defied her years. The news, once filled with fear and confusion, now echoed with the stories of resistance. Every victory, however small, was amplified, a beacon of hope against the Xy'lar's relentless assault. She wasn't alone. The world had embraced her grief, her rage, her defiance. She was a reminder of the innocence lost, of the brutal injustice that had sparked this inferno. Her story became a rallying cry, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. People now called her the Flame, a moniker born from the fire in her eyes, a fire that mirrored the burning rage and longing for justice that coursed through every human heart. She wasn't a soldier, nor a leader. She was simply a girl, forever marked by a tragedy, who refused to let the Xy'lar extinguish the light within her. The resistance had formed, a tapestry woven from disparate threads. Soldiers, hardened by years of battle, stood shoulder to shoulder alongside scientists, their minds ablaze with innovations. Farmers, their hands once tilling the soil, now wielded weapons, their hearts hardened by the loss of their families, their homes. But the Xy'lar were not a force to be underestimated. Their technology was staggering, their tactics ruthless and efficient. They had brought fire to earth, both literally and figuratively, and each day the battle raged on. Chloe, now a seasoned face on the resistance circuit, traveled across the ravaged landscape, meeting with soldiers, civilians, and leaders, sharing her story, igniting the fire of defiance in every heart. She witnessed the pain, the fear, the anger, but also the unwavering determination that echoed in the eyes of those who had lost so much. One day, she found herself in a temporary encampment, nestled in the shadow of a fallen skyscraper. The air hummed with the anxious buzz of activity, the stench of blood and burning metal thick in the air. Chloe, her face grim, stood before a group of soldiers, their faces etched with the scars of battle. "They took everything from us," she said, her voice ringing with a quiet rage. "They took our peace, our homes, our lives. But they didn't take our spirit. We will fight back." Her words, simple yet powerful, resonated with the soldiers. A collective nod, a shared look of grim determination. They were not fighting just to reclaim what was lost. They were fighting for a future where their children wouldn't have to fear the sky. Chloe continued her journey, a small flame flickering in the face of a vast, destructive storm. She knew the fight was far from over, that the road ahead would be paved with blood and sacrifice. But she also knew, with unwavering certainty, that humanity would not be extinguished. They would rise from the ashes, stronger, more united, more determined than ever before. The flame was burning, and its light, however small, was slowly illuminating the path to a future free from the shadow of the Xy'lar. The air hung heavy in the cramped, cluttered laboratory. A symphony of whirring machinery and crackling electricity filled the space, punctuated by the rhythmic hammering of Anya's hands against a steel panel. Sweat beaded on her brow, her face etched with exhaustion and a fierce determination that burned brighter than the arc lamps illuminating the room. For weeks, she had lived and breathed this project, her life reduced to a relentless cycle of calculations, experiments, and the constant hum of her invention. It was a machine unlike any other, a testament to her ostracized theories, a weapon forged not from brute force, but from a profound understanding of the Xy'lar biology. A weapon that exploited their reliance on their chitinous exoskeletons, their very foundation, turning it into their undoing. Her fingers danced across the control panel. A final sequence of commands entered. The air around the machine pulsed with an invisible energy, the hum rising to a deafening crescendo. Anya held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. The culmination of months of tireless work, a gamble that could either save humanity or condemn them. A sudden flash of blinding light illuminated the room, followed by a deafening roar. Anya shielded her eyes, her body trembling with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The machine had activated. The weapon, a massive, pulsating sphere of energy, hummed ominously in the center of the room. Its surface shimmered with an ethereal light, pulsating in rhythm with Anya's frantic heartbeat. She knew she had achieved the impossible. She had cracked the Xy'lar's defenses, their vaunted technology a mere shell before the destructive potential of her creation. But there was a heavy price to pay. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a tool of annihilation, a force capable of irrevocably altering the balance of existence. The ethical implications weighed heavily on her mind, the doubts gnawing at her conscience. An urgent knock broke her reverie. A grizzled soldier, his face scarred and weathered, stood in the doorway. General Kuznetsov. He looked at the machine, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "It's ready, General," Anya stated, her voice hoarse. "It's time." Kuznetsov strode into the room, his heavy boots echoing on the steel floor. He scrutinized the weapon, his gaze lingering on the pulsating sphere of energy. His usual gruff demeanor softened, replaced by a flicker of awe and trepidation. This is truly something else," he finally admitted, his voice strained. "But are you sure? Are you absolutely sure it will work?" Anya met his gaze, her own unwavering. "I have no room for doubt, General. This is our only hope. We fight or we perish." A silence descended, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the weapon. The weight of their decision pressed down on them, the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. Anya knew they were facing a moral abyss, a choice that would forever alter the course of history. "We have no choice," Kuznetsov finally said, his voice firm. "We have to try." He looked at Anya, his eyes filled with a weary understanding. He knew, as she did, that the path they had chosen was a dangerous one, fraught with risk and unimaginable consequences. But they were the guardians of humanity, and they had to act. "Prepare the launch teams," he ordered, his voice echoing in the silent lab. "We will show the Xy'lar what it means to underestimate humanity." Anya nodded, a grim resolve hardening her features. The burden of responsibility pressed down on her, but she wouldn't falter. She had built this weapon, a weapon of desperation, a testament to the depths of human ingenuity. It was time for it to be unleashed. As the launch teams assembled, Anya watched the pulsating energy sphere, a cold dread gripping her heart. This was not merely a battle, it was a gamble, a desperate throw of the dice. But in the face of annihilation, even the most unthinkable actions became justified. The fate of humanity rested on this weapon, on the gamble she had taken. The consequences, for better or worse, were about to unfold. The Xy'lar were learning a brutal lesson. Their attempts to quell the growing rebellion with force had backfired spectacularly. Instead of cowering under their might, humanity was rising, their anger fueling a tide of defiance that washed over the planet. Chloe, the girl whose puppy had become a martyr, was now a beacon of that defiance. Her grief, raw and unyielding, had resonated with millions. Images of her tear-streaked face, her tiny fist clenched in rage, were plastered across screens worldwide. She had become a symbol, a rallying cry for a humanity united in their shared pain and burgeoning anger. Her story, now known to every corner of the globe, had spurred countless others to join the resistance. From seasoned soldiers to tech-savvy teenagers, the ranks swelled daily, their shared hatred for the Xy'lar a potent force. The Xy'lar, however, remained oblivious to the shift in the tide. Their arrogance, their belief in their technological superiority, blinded them to the unyielding spirit of a people who had been pushed too far. They continued to respond to the resistance with brutal force, believing that fear would subdue the uprising. The streets of major cities, once teeming with life, had become battlegrounds. The Xy'lar, with their grotesque insectoid forms and shimmering weapons, clashed with a human force that was now growing bolder. The Xy'lar, accustomed to swift and decisive victories, were shocked by the ferocity with which humans fought back. In the ruins of a once bustling shopping mall, a group of resistance fighters engaged a Xy'lar patrol. The air crackled with energy, the hum of alien weapons intermingling with a guttural roar of modified human firearms. The scene was chaotic, a ballet of bullets and plasma bursts, smoke and screams. A young man, barely a teenager, his face smeared with grime and sweat, dodged a plasma bolt that hissed past his ear. He fired back, his laser rifle spitting a beam of light that vaporized a Xy'lar soldier. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a sense of righteous fury that propelled him forward. Across the globe, a similar scene unfolded in the heart of London. A woman, her face hardened by grief, stood on the rooftop of a bombed-out building, her eyes fixed on the sky. She watched as a Xy'lar ship descended, its underbelly spitting out troops. Her hands, shaking with anger, gripped the rifle that she barely knew how to use. She had lost her husband, her son, in the Xy'lar's onslaught. Her heart, once filled with love, now beat with a fierce, unyielding hatred. Her anger, a potent fuel, propelled her towards the descending Xy'lar troops. The Xy'lar's response was predictable, brutal and swift. They unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, reducing buildings to rubble, turning the city into a charnel house. Yet, the human resistance fought back. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but they held their ground, their defiance a testament to their indomitable spirit. The Xy'lar, their arrogance slowly cracking under the weight of their losses, began to understand that their enemy was not just a species, but a force of nature. They understood the power of anger, of grief, of a people united by a shared tragedy. The battle, a symphony of screams, echoed across the planet. It was a testament to the resilience of humanity, a grim dance with destiny, where loss and rage fueled a fight for survival. The Xy'lar, for the first time, felt a flicker of doubt. The tide was shifting. The humans, once seemingly passive and docile, were now a force to be reckoned with. The world was burning, but from the ashes, a phoenix was rising. The air hung thick with a stench of burning metal and acrid smoke. A symphony of explosions and gunfire drowned out the screams of the fallen, painting the night sky with an infernal ballet of light. The streets of London, once a bustling hub of life, were now a desolate battlefield, a testament to the brutal reality of war. Chloe, her face smeared with soot and tears, crouched behind a shattered bus stop, her heart hammering against her ribs. She clutched Sparky's leash in her hand, the metal still cold, a constant reminder of the unimaginable loss she had suffered. Fear threatened to consume her, but a flicker of defiance burned within. She wouldn't let the Xy'lar break her. She watched as a group of resistance fighters, their faces grim under the harsh glare of the streetlights, carved their way through the Xy'lar ranks. Each bullet was a whisper of hope, each explosion a defiant roar. They fought with the ferocity of cornered animals, their desperation fueled by a burning desire for vengeance. Chloe had witnessed the horrors of the Xy'lar firsthand. Their cruelty, their utter disregard for human life, had ignited a fire in her soul. She was no longer the innocent little girl walking her puppy in a park. This war had forged her into something else, something stronger, something determined. But even in the midst of this chaos, a glimmer of hope emerged. The Xy'lar, once seemingly invincible, were faltering. Their technology, once so advanced, was beginning to malfunction. Their chitinous exoskeletons, the very armor that had made them seem indestructible, were now cracking and breaking under the onslaught of a weapon unlike anything they had ever encountered. News of the weapon, dubbed the Chimera by the scientists who had created it, had spread through the resistance like wildfire. No one knew exactly how it worked, but the results were undeniable. The Xy'lar were losing ground, their once perfect formations now scattered and chaotic. "They are falling back," a voice boomed through the earpiece in Chloe's pocket. It was General Kuznetsov, his voice strained, but laced with hope. "The Chimera is working. We've turned the tide." Chloe looked around. The fighting was still fierce, but the tide had definitely shifted. The Xy'lar were retreating, their movements erratic, their once confident demeanor replaced by a desperate scramble to survive. "Chloe," the voice in her earpiece whispered, "we have to get you out of there. It's getting too dangerous." Chloe hesitated, her eyes scanning the ravaged streets. She could see the Xy'lar pulling back, their numbers dwindling as they were picked off by the resistance fighters. But she couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until she had done her part. She took a deep breath, the air stinging her lungs, and checked her weapon. A simple, hand-held laser pistol, a far cry from the advanced weaponry the Xy'lar wielded. But for Chloe, it was a symbol of her defiance. She emerged from her cover, her small frame a beacon of courage in the chaos. She aimed her weapon, her finger tightening around the trigger. She wasn't aiming to kill. She was aiming to hurt, to make them suffer as they had made her suffer. The first shot flew, hitting a fleeing Xy'lar in the leg. The creature screamed, a guttural, insect-like sound, and collapsed onto the pavement. Chloe didn't hesitate. She fired again and again, her shots finding their mark. Around her, other resistance fighters joined her, their own weapons blazing. The Xy'lar were caught off guard. They had expected a fight, but nothing like this. This wasn't the panicked, disorganized mob they thought humans would be. This was a force fueled by rage, by a deep, primal need for revenge. And for the first time since their arrival, the Xy'lar were genuinely afraid. They were losing, not just because of the weapon, but because they had underestimated their enemy. They had misjudged the human spirit, its resilience, its capacity for both love and hate. As the Xy'lar retreated, leaving behind a trail of destruction and death, Chloe stood amidst the wreckage, her heart still pounding, her hands shaking. She had killed, but she felt no regret. She had done what she had to do. She had fought for Sparky. She had fought for humanity. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, there was a glimmer of hope in the air. The Xy'lar were retreating, their grip on Earth slipping. The humans had fought back, and they had won. The first victory, a small but significant one, had brought a sense of euphoria, a feeling that they could actually win this war. Chloe looked up at the night sky, the stars shining brightly above the smoke-filled city. The war was far from over, but tonight she could allow herself a moment of hope. Tonight she could allow herself to believe that Sparky would be avenged. Tonight she could allow herself to believe that humanity would prevail. The air crackled with a nervous energy that pulsed through the makeshift command center, a converted school gymnasium in the heart of what was once a bustling city. Outside, the world was a patchwork of destruction and resilience. Buildings, scarred and hollow-eyed, reached towards a sky choked with smoke and the lingering stench of Xy'lar technology. Yet amidst the chaos, a flicker of hope had ignited. Dr. Anya Petrova, her hair a mess of white and gray, stood before a makeshift projector, its light casting an unsettling glow across her wan face. Her eyes, usually bright and full of life, were now shadowed with fatigue and a burden of knowledge. The screen behind her displayed a chaotic mess of equations and diagrams, the culmination of years of research and obsession. Her fingers traced the lines, a symphony of anxieties and triumphs. "It's done," she announced, her voice rasping, echoing through the cavernous space. "The weapon is operational." The room erupted in a cacophony of cheers, relieved breaths, and the clinking of metal against metal as soldiers, engineers, and scientists alike moved closer to the source of this sudden hope. Chloe, now a familiar figure with her perpetually stained clothes and the ghost of Sparky clinging to her eyes, stood at the edge of the crowd. She watched Dr. Petrova with a mix of apprehension and a flickering ember of hope. General Kuznetsov, his face weathered by the weight of command and the horrors he had witnessed, approached Anya, his gaze grim yet determined. "Dr. Petrova, are you certain this will work?" "I have no doubt," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremors in her hands. "This weapon exploits a fundamental weakness in Xy'lar biology. Their exoskeletons, their very essence, are susceptible to the frequency I've developed. It will cripple their technology, disrupt their communication, and leave them vulnerable. And the Xy'lar are aware of this," Chloe piped up, her voice small but insistent. "They'll counter it, won't they?" Anya turned towards her, a ghost of a smile gracing her lips. "Chloe, you are a wise one, it seems. Yes, they will try. But we have an advantage. We've taken them by surprise. They assumed their technology was invincible. They have no idea what they are facing." "What happens then?" asked a young soldier, his voice trembling. "After we cripple them, what then?" The weight of the entire world seemed to settle on Anya's shoulders. "That, my friend," she said, her voice dropping to a solemn whisper, "that is the question we must all answer." The tension in the room thickened. The Xy'lar had brought death and destruction, stolen innocence, and fractured the fabric of humanity. Now there was a chance to strike back, to exact retribution. But what would it cost? "What if," Chloe's voice cut through the silence, her eyes fixed on Anya, "what if we can do more than just cripple them? What if we can end them?" Anya's face hardened, her gaze meeting Chloe's, a mirror of her own pain and fury. "We are not monsters, Chloe. We are humans. We are not to be consumed by the same hatred that drove the Xy'lar." "But they killed Sparky," Chloe choked, tears welling up in her eyes. "They killed Sparky, and they haven't paid the price. They haven't felt the pain we feel." "I understand your anger, Chloe," Anya said, her voice soft. "But we are not them. We are better than that. We must not become the monsters we fight." Chloe's gaze dropped, her shoulders slumping under the weight of her pain and the impossible burden of choice. The room held its breath, the silence a symphony of unspoken questions and the echoes of shattered dreams. Anya knew the answer, the terrible truth lurking beneath the surface, the consequences of their choices. It was a choice that would leave an indelible mark on the very fabric of humanity, a choice that would define their future, their legacy. "We have an opportunity," she said, her voice firm, her gaze meeting those around her. "An opportunity to protect our world, to ensure a future where no child has to witness the horrors we have seen. But at what cost? A voice whispered from the back of the room. Anya met the gaze of the soldier, her heart heavy with the weight of their shared grief and the burden of their choice. "It will be a hard fight," she said, her voice a low rumble. "But we will fight it. We will fight for our world, for our children, for our future." The silence in the room broke, replaced by a chorus of determined voices. The fight had been chosen, and the world would bear witness to the consequences. The air crackled with a disquiet tension, a tangible weight pressing down on humanity. It wasn't just the looming presence of the celestial harbinger, that monstrous vessel hanging in the sky like a metallic scar on the tapestry of the cosmos. It was the knowledge that the Xy'lar, those arrogant, insectoid beings, had tested human resolve and found it wanting. The memory of Sparky, the innocent puppy, gunned down by the Xy'lar, was etched into the collective psyche, a wound festering with rage and a burning thirst for retribution. Inside the subterranean complex, a cacophony of activity echoed through the tunnels. Scientists, engineers, and technicians worked tirelessly, their faces illuminated by the cold blue glow of holographic displays. In the heart of this chaotic hive of activity, Dr. Anya Petrova sat hunched over a console, her fingers dancing across the control panel, a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation etched on her face. She had poured her blood, sweat, and tears into this project, defying the scorn of her peers, the whispers of madness that trailed her like a shadow. Now, the fruits of her labor were within reach. The weapon, a colossal device pulsating with a menacing energy, hummed with a life of its own, a tangible embodiment of humanity's collective fury. "Dr. Petrova," a voice boomed from behind her. General Ivan Kuznetsov, his face etched with both worry and grim resolve, stood in the shadows. "We need to know, does it work?" Anya turned, her gaze meeting the general's, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. "It does, but it comes with a price." Kuznetsov stepped closer, his gaze settling on the pulsating energy source at the heart of the weapon. "What price, Doctor?" Anya took a deep breath, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. "It's not just a weapon, General. It's a fire that will consume everything in its path." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Kuznetsov grasped the gravity of her statement. He knew what she was talking about: the Xy'lar's reliance on their chitinous exoskeletons, the vulnerability that Anya had exploited with her creation. "Explain, Doctor." Kuznetsov's voice was low, a tremor of apprehension running through it. "The weapon emits a specific frequency," Anya explained, gesturing towards the console. "It resonates with the Xy'lar's exoskeletons, causing them to disintegrate." "Disintegrate?" Kuznetsov stepped back, his face pale. Is that even possible?" "It is," Anya affirmed, her tone resolute. "And it's our only chance. The Xy'lar underestimated us, General. They thought we were weak, easily manipulated. But we are not. We are human, and we will fight back." "But at what cost?" Kuznetsov's question echoed the unspoken fear that gnawed at Anya's heart. The weapon was a beacon of hope, yes, but it was also a Pandora's box, holding the potential for unprecedented destruction. "The cost is the price of survival, General. The Xy'lar have shown us their cruelty. They have shown us what they will do to us if we let them. We cannot let them win. We cannot let them destroy us." Anya's words were a mantra, a defiant cry against the encroaching darkness. Kuznetsov, though burdened by the weight of his responsibility, understood her logic. The Xy'lar had pushed humanity to the brink, to the point where survival itself had become a gamble, a desperate play for a future that seemed increasingly uncertain. "Then we fight," Kuznetsov declared, his voice regaining its unwavering authority. "We fight for our world, for our future, for every life that the Xy'lar took from us. We fight for Sparky." A wave of grim resolve washed over the command center. The scientists, the engineers, the technicians all shared a common purpose, a newfound unity forged in the crucible of fear and rage, a collective will to strike back, to make the Xy'lar pay for their crimes. They had been pushed to the edge, but in their desperation, They had found something far more powerful than any weapon: a shared sense of purpose, a united front against an existential threat. The fires of vengeance were ignited, their flames licking at the edges of despair, ready to consume anything in their path. The air crackled with anticipation, the silence heavier than any storm cloud. From the moment the celestial harbinger shattered the sky, a palpable tension had gripped the globe. Every breath, every heartbeat, echoed the uncertainty that choked the world. Chloe, watching from her window, saw the harbinger loom against the fading light. It was a monstrous monument to alien engineering, a jagged, metallic leviathan that dwarfed even the tallest skyscrapers. Its sheer size instilled a primal fear, a whisper of the unknown echoing in the depths of her soul. Inside, her parents argued. Her father, a man of logic and reason, tried to make sense of the impossible. He spoke of diplomacy, of understanding alien cultures. But her mother, fiercely protective, saw only threat. Her voice trembled, a choked plea for safety, for a normalcy that felt long gone. Chloe understood both their anxieties. She couldn't erase the image of Sparky, the playful puppy that had become a casualty in the Xy'lar's cold, callous calculations. She couldn't dismiss the horrifying feeling that something deeply wrong, had descended upon their world. The news cycled endlessly, each update bringing more grim pronouncements. The Xy'lar, their intentions still shrouded in mystery, were a constant presence. They moved like a plague, their alien technology flickering with an unsettling blue light. Their 8-limbed forms a grotesque mockery of natural order. Chloe found solace in the virtual world, retreating into the online communities that had sprung up in the wake of the Xy'lar arrival. There, she found others like her, each carrying the weight of fear and uncertainty. They shared their stories, their anxieties, their whispered hopes for a future that seemed increasingly distant. One name, however, dominated the discourse: Dr. Anya Petrova. A brilliant scientist, ostracized for her unconventional theories. She had been all but forgotten until the Xy'lar arrival. Suddenly, she was the beacon of hope, the one who dared to think differently, to challenge the Xy'lar's supposed technological superiority. Her name was whispered with reverence in the online forums. Rumors circulated, sometimes wild, sometimes unsettling. They spoke of a weapon, a device designed to exploit a weakness in the Xy'lar's chitinous exoskeletons. They spoke of a plan, a daring gambit to break the Xy'lar's stranglehold on Earth. Chloe, like many others, clung to these whispers. She wasn't sure if Petrova's weapon was real, but it gave her a sliver of hope, a flicker of defiance in the face of the alien threat. It was a faint light, but in the looming darkness, even the faintest light could offer solace. The world, however, was a chaotic patchwork of fear and resistance. The Xy'lar, their arrogance a shield against human understanding, had underestimated the power of unity. The death of Sparky, a symbol of their callous brutality, had ignited a firestorm of opposition. Governments, initially hesitant, were forced to bow to the will of their people. A global coalition, born out of necessity, was scrambling to develop a response, but even the most seasoned military minds were baffled by the Xy'lar's technology. Chloe, her own grief a constant companion, found an outlet for her anger. She channeled her frustration into action, joining the online resistance movement. She participated in virtual protests, shared information, and even designed propaganda posters that spread like wildfire across the digital landscape. Each day, the Xy'lar's presence loomed larger. They were not content with simply observing. They were imposing their will. They had begun to tighten controls, their alien technologies spreading like a virus, their influence creeping into every aspect of human life. The whispers of resistance grew louder, fueled by fear and desperation. One day, a video surfaced online. It showed a small group of rebels, clad in makeshift armor and brandishing makeshift weapons, engaging with Xy'lar patrols. The rebels were outnumbered, outgunned, yet they fought with a ferocity that sent shivers down Chloe's spine. The video ended abruptly, but the image of those rebels, standing defiant against a seemingly invincible foe, resonated with Chloe. She saw her own reflection in their eyes, the same fear, the same anger, the same fierce yearning for freedom. The Xy'lar, for all their supposed technological superiority, had failed to understand one fundamental truth. Humans, driven by desperation, could be incredibly resourceful, incredibly resilient. They had underestimated human spirit, the unbreakable bond that held them together, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The shadow of the Harbinger stretched across the world, but the fires of resistance were burning bright, and in the hearts of those who refused to surrender, a hope flickered, a hope fueled by the whisper of a weapon that might just be the key to breaking the Xy'lar's grip on their world. The air crackled with a nervous energy, a sea of faces, a million individual anxieties coalescing into a collective storm of anticipation, turned towards the makeshift stage erected in the heart of what was once a bustling city square. But now the city was a skeleton, a testament to the devastation the Xy'lar had wrought. The once vibrant buildings stood mangled, scarred, their windows vacant eyes staring out at the gathering crowd. Chloe, her face pale but resolute, stood at the front, a microphone clutched in her small hand. Her story, the story of a little girl and her puppy, had become a rallying cry, a symbol of human suffering and a potent reminder of the Xy'lar's cruelty. She couldn't bring herself to talk about the day Sparky died. The image burned too brightly in her mind, a raw wound that refused to heal. But she could speak of what came after, the rage, the grief, and the burgeoning hope. "We are not broken," she said, her voice strong despite the tremor in her throat. "We are not defeated. We are humans, and we will fight back. We will fight for our families, our homes, our world." Her eyes, wide with a fire that burned brighter than any torch, swept across the crowd. The people, a tapestry of races and ages, all different, yet united by a shared purpose, mirrored her fervor. Behind her, towering over the ruins of the city, stood the celestial Harbinger, a colossal, ominous presence. Its once pristine surface was now pockmarked with the remnants of human bombardments, a testament to the escalating conflict. The Xy'lar hadn't been idle. They responded to the human resistance with brute force, with a chilling efficiency that left no room for mercy. But each attack, each act of violence, only solidified human resolve. On the stage, Dr. Petrova, her face tired but her eyes burning with a fierce intelligence, adjusted the microphone. She was a woman of science, a woman of logic, but the grief etched in her face spoke volumes of the human cost of this war. "We are not a race of barbarians. We are not monsters. But we are not lambs to the slaughter either," she said, her voice low but carrying a weight of conviction that resonated through the crowd. "We will not be subjugated. We will not be enslaved. We will fight, and we will win." She gestured towards the hulking mass of the celestial Harbinger. The Xy'lar came to Earth promising utopia. They promised progress, they promised knowledge. Instead, they brought death, destruction, and despair. They killed our children, they decimated our cities, and they treated our planet with the utmost disrespect. But their arrogance, their hubris, has blinded them to one simple truth: we are not as weak as they believe us to be. A hush fell over the crowd. Everyone was captivated, waiting for what came next. In the heart of the gathering, a soldier stood tall, his face grim. He had seen firsthand the horrors of war, the faces of fallen comrades, the wreckage of an Earth he used to know. But now he looked at the resolute faces around him, at the unwavering eyes of Dr. Petrova and Chloe, and he felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. He had been skeptical, a product of a world that had taught him to be pragmatically pessimistic. But something was changing. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for humanity. Dr. Petrova raised her chin, her gaze unwavering. "We developed a weapon," she said, her voice tinged with a blend of apprehension and pride. "A weapon designed to exploit their weaknesses, to harness the power of nature against their technology." A ripple of unease snaked through the crowd. The whispers, hushed but insistent, were a testament to the lingering fear of what they had unleashed. They knew the Xy'lar were strong, they knew they had faced overwhelming odds. But they also knew, deep inside, that their resilience, their spirit, had somehow matched the threat they faced. "This weapon," Dr. Petrova continued, "will not be a solution. It will not be a cure. It will be a hammer, a tool to strike back, a symbol of our defiance. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. We are fighting for our future. We are fighting for the right to live, the right to choose our own destiny. And we will not falter. We will not surrender. We will fight back, with every fiber of our being, until the Xy'lar are driven from our skies, and their threat is silenced forever. As her voice faded, a murmur of agreement rose from the crowd. They were no longer just people. They were a force, a collective consciousness that refused to be broken. They were humanity, forged in the crucible of war, and they were ready to fight. The crowd dispersed. The energy that had crackled in the air was now a palpable sense of purpose, a shared resolve that echoed throughout the ruins of the city. Chloe, her small figure dwarfed by the scale of the ruined cityscape, turned to Dr. Petrova, her eyes bright with tears. "We'll win, won't we?" she asked, her voice a thread of hope in the wind. Dr. Petrova smiled, a gesture that offered no comfort but held the gravity of their shared understanding. "We have to, Chloe." She placed a hand on Chloe's shoulder, a gesture of both support and shared burden. "We have to." As the sun sank below the horizon, casting long, distorted shadows across the ravaged cityscape, a new dawn began to break. It wasn't a dawn of light, not yet. It was a dawn of steel, of unwavering determination, of the human spirit refusing to be broken. The Xy'lar may have come for Earth, but they had unwittingly awakened a force they had never anticipated, a force that would forever change the face of the universe. They had come to conquer, but they would find only defiance. And now, the hammer of justice was about to fall. The air hung heavy with anticipation. A palpable tension crackled through the makeshift camp, a cacophony of whispered conversations and the rhythmic tap of fingers against metal. It had been weeks since the news of Dr. Petrova's weapon had spread through the resistance, a beacon of hope in the midst of the Xy'lar's relentless attacks. Chloe sat on a crate, her gaze fixed on the horizon, where the celestial harbinger loomed in the twilight sky. The world had been painted in shades of gray since the day Sparky was shot. The innocence of a child's laughter, the vibrant colors of a sunset, had all faded into the dull backdrop of fear and uncertainty. But now, a flicker of defiance burned in Chloe's heart. The news of the weapon had ignited a spark of hope, a fire that threatened to consume her despair. She looked to her right, where General Kuznetsov stood, his face etched with a mixture of worry and grim resolve. The man had seen more battles than he could count, but the look in his eyes revealed the weight of the coming confrontation. He had placed his faith in Petrova's creation, but the fear of failure hung heavy in the air. Chloe knew that he understood the stakes. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for humanity's dignity. "They're coming," a voice whispered behind her. Chloe turned to see a young soldier, his face pale, but his eyes filled with a newfound determination. The news had spread like wildfire through the camp, news of the Xy'lar mobilizing their forces, preparing for a final stand. The Xy'lar had grown increasingly desperate in recent weeks. Their attempts to quell the resistance through brute force had only backfired, solidifying humanity's resolve. Their once perfect technology, once a symbol of their superiority, had been hampered by Petrova's weapon, a virus that slowly eroded their chitinous armor. But they still held the advantage in numbers and firepower. A cold wind swept through the camp, carrying with it the distant hum of Xy'lar engines. The soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons, their breaths shallow and quick. They had been trained for this, prepared for the inevitable clash. But a deep-seated fear, a primal instinct, coursed through their veins. They were fighting for their world, for their families, for their very existence. The signal came through, a crackle of static followed by a voice, sharp and urgent. "They're approaching. Get to your positions." The camp erupted into a flurry of activity. Soldiers scrambled to their stations, adjusting their weapons, checking their ammunition. Chloe felt a surge of adrenaline course through her, a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The long wait was over. The battle was upon them. She stood beside Kuznetsov, his hand resting reassuringly on her shoulder. "You'll be safe, Chloe," he said, his voice low and steady. "They won't get past us." But Chloe wasn't sure. The Xy'lar were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. The fear that had been a constant companion since that fateful day, the day Sparky was taken, tightened its grip on her heart. "I know," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But what about them? What about the Xy'lar?" Kuznetsov looked at her, his eyes filled with pity. "We can't afford to think about them, Chloe," he said. "We have to focus on ourselves. We have to survive." Chloe knew he was right. But the image of Sparky, his innocent eyes filled with terror, flickered before her eyes. She couldn't ignore the Xy'lar, their brutal actions, the fear they had inflicted on so many. They were the enemy, but they were also living beings, and even in their desperation, they still held the power to destroy everything. The ground trembled beneath her feet as a wave of Xy'lar ships descended, casting long shadows across the battlefield. The sky filled with a cacophony of engines, the air thick with a smell of ozone and burning fuel. Chloe felt a wave of nausea, the reality of the situation crashing down on her. This was it, the final battle. But she wasn't the only one facing this moment. All across the battlefield, soldiers stood ready, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and determination. They had been pushed to their limits, their backs against the wall. But they would fight. They would fight for their loved ones, for the future of their world, for the memory of Sparky. They would fight for their humanity. And as the Xy'lar soldiers stormed the battlefield, their chitinous armor gleaming under the moonlight, Chloe knew that this wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for their souls. The sky above Earth was a canvas of bruised purple and bruised orange, the dying embers of a sun choked by the thick smoke billowing from countless battles. Chloe, eyes red-rimmed from crying but her spirit steely, stared through the thick haze at the spectacle unfolding on the horizon. The Xy'lar had finally made their move. The celestial harbinger, the obsidian leviathan that had brought them to Earth, now hovered over the burning ruins of what was once a bustling city. Its underbelly, a writhing mass of grotesque, metallic appendages, pulsed with a sickly green light as it unleashed its fury upon the ground below. Beams of energy, thick as tree trunks and crackling with raw, unnatural power, smashed through buildings, each strike leaving a gaping wound in the city's scarred flesh. Chloe wasn't the only one watching. Around her, the remnants of the human resistance regrouped, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and grim resolve. They were a motley crew: soldiers, engineers, students, teachers, all bound together by the shared loss of Sparky and the burning rage that had taken root in their hearts. Their arsenal, a desperate patchwork of repurposed technology and makeshift weaponry, stood in stark contrast to the Xy'lar's sleek, terrifying weaponry. General Kuznetsov, his face weathered and etched with battle fatigue, addressed them in a voice that was as gruff as his appearance. "They've finally come for us," he said, his voice tight. "They know we're here, and they're not going to let us stand in their way." A hush fell over the assembly. Chloe, her hand gripping the worn collar of her jacket, felt the ground tremble beneath her feet as the Xy'lar unleashed another barrage of energy. "We've been waiting for this moment, for weeks," Kuznetsov continued, his voice a low growl. "This is where we make a stand. Remember Sparky, remember what they did, remember every soldier, every civilian, every life they've taken. Remember humanity, and remember, we are not alone." He gestured towards the silhouette of a solitary figure standing on a hill overlooking the battlefield. Dr. Petrova, her face pale, but her eyes burning with an intense, almost chilling focus, held aloft a device that pulsed with a fierce, blue light. It was the weapon that gave them a chance. "We've been waiting for this," she said, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "We've been waiting for this." The Xy'lar, sensing their presence, responded with a volley of energy beams. The ground around them erupted in geysers of fire and debris, but none of it reached Petrova. She had anticipated their attack, her movements swift and precise as she activated a series of defensive shields. "Hold your ground," Kuznetsov boomed, his voice echoing across the battlefield. "And watch the dawn." The first Xy'lar troop to reach their position was a swarm of insectoid creatures. their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming under the sickly light of the celestial harbinger. Their mandibles clicked and chattered as they advanced, their 8 segmented limbs moving with a coordinated grace that was unnervingly alien. But the Xy'lar were not prepared for what awaited them. As they reached the edge of Petrova's defenses, the world around them seemed to warp and bend. The air crackled with a blue light that danced and pulsed, a stark contrast to the chilling green emanating from the celestial harbinger. And then the Xy'lar began to scream. The screams were not the kind of animalistic roars that one might expect from a creature of their size and appearance. They were high-pitched and piercing, filled with a primal terror that made the hairs on Chloe's neck stand on end. She saw Xy'lar soldiers, their exoskeletons shimmering with a sickly green glow, contort in agonizing pain. They flailed their limbs, their mandibles snapping in a desperate, futile attempt to escape the invisible force that was tearing them apart. Petrova's weapon, the weapon that exploited the Xy'lar's reliance on their chitinous exoskeletons, was working. It was a weapon of pure, unadulterated destruction, a weapon that was as merciless as the Xy'lar had been when they had taken Sparky's life. The Xy'lar, caught off guard by the effectiveness of the weapon, were thrown into disarray. Their coordinated movements devolved into panicked flailing, their formation breaking apart as they scrambled to escape the encroaching blue light. Chloe, surrounded by the remnants of the human resistance, watched in awe as the Xy'lar were systematically dismantled by the weapon. Her fear gave way to a chilling sense of satisfaction. "This is for Sparky," she muttered, her voice thick with emotion. "This is for all of us." The Xy'lar, realizing they were facing an enemy they could not defeat, began to retreat. The celestial harbinger, its underbelly glowing with a desperate red light, rose from the ground and turned towards the horizon. "They're retreating," General Kuznetsov declared, his voice tinged with a mix of relief and grim anticipation. "But they're not leaving." The battle was far from over. The Xy'lar, their pride and arrogance shattered, would surely return, and Chloe knew that, despite their victory, the scars of the war would remain, etched forever into the fabric of their existence. But for now, the human resistance stood victorious, their eyes fixed on the retreating figure of the celestial harbinger as it disappeared into the smoke-choked sky. They had tasted victory, a bitter, bloody victory, but it was theirs. And somewhere, in the heart of every human watching that blood-red dawn, a spark of hope had been rekindled. They had survived. They had fought back. They had shown the Xy'lar what it meant to be human. The air crackled with static, a symphony of dying energy that echoed the crumbling morale of the Xy'lar forces. Their once imposing fleet, a testament to their technological prowess, was now a mangled wreckage, a testament to the terrifying effectiveness of Dr. Petrova's weapon. The once bright, sleek ships, their surfaces shimmering with advanced materials, were now charred husks, their advanced maneuvering systems rendered useless. The Xy'lar, their chitinous exoskeletons, their source of both strength and vulnerability, were now crackling and smoking. Chloe watched from the window of the makeshift command center, her heart a heavy drum in her chest. For weeks, she had been on the front lines, witnessing the horrors of war firsthand. She had seen courage and brutality, despair and hope, all intertwined in a chaotic tapestry of carnage. Despite everything, she clung to a flicker of hope, a conviction that humanity could overcome this monstrous threat. The sight before her was a testament to that hope, a beacon of light in the abyss of despair. "It's working," General Kuznetsov said, his voice gruff but laced with a sliver of elation. He stood beside her, his eyes glued to the holographic displays showcasing the Xy'lar's deteriorating fleet. "Their technology is failing. They're vulnerable." They're dying," Chloe whispered, a stark contrast to the jubilant chatter filling the command center. Her words struck a chord with the general. He turned to her, his face etched with a grim expression. "It's not pretty, Chloe," he admitted, his voice heavy with the weight of the situation. "But it's necessary. We had to fight back." Chloe knew he was right. The Xy'lar had attacked with brutal force, their disregard for human life a chilling testament to their arrogance. They had taken Sparky, their actions a symbol of their cruelty. And now, facing annihilation, their once unstoppable technology was crumbling, leaving them vulnerable, exposed. She felt a prickle of guilt, a whisper of doubt. This was a victory, a turning point in the war, but it came at a terrible cost. The Xy'lar were not invincible, but they were intelligent, capable of feeling pain, suffering. Were they truly deserving of this fate? "They're trying to flee," a young communications officer announced, his voice filled with urgency. "They're heading towards a dimensional rift." The news sent a shiver down Chloe's spine. They were losing, yes, but they were not surrendering. They were retreating, attempting to escape the consequences of their aggression, leaving behind a trail of destruction. "We have to stop them," General Kuznetsov declared, his jaw clenched, a steely glint in his eyes. "We can't let them escape. Not after what they've done." "But," Chloe started, her voice caught in her throat. "What if they're just trying to go home?" "Go home?" General Kuznetsov scoffed, his tone laced with bitterness. "They have no home to go to. Their world is as corrupt and cruel as they are. They're nothing more than parasites who deserve to be eradicated." Chloe felt a knot of unease in her stomach. The Xy'lar's tactics had been horrific, but could she truly support their extermination? It was a thought that had haunted her since the moment she witnessed Sparky's tragic demise. Would humanity, fueled by anger and vengeance, be any different? The Xy'lar's fleet was on the move, their escape attempt a desperate gamble. Their technology, failing rapidly, struggled to maintain their trajectory. The Xy'lar general, his face contorted with rage and fear, barked orders while his soldiers frantically attempted to stabilize their failing systems. He knew they were caught in a trap, a desperate gambit by a species they considered inferior. But the humans had learned, adapted, evolved. They were no longer the frightened, disunified race the Xy'lar had encountered. They were united, driven by a shared grief and a thirst for justice. "General Kuznetsov," Chloe said, her voice barely a whisper. "We can't keep fighting them. Not forever." The general turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Do you know why we're fighting them, Chloe?" he asked, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Because they started this war. They invaded our world, our home. They killed Sparky, a symbol of our innocence, our love for life. We had no choice but to fight back." "I know," Chloe replied, her voice tinged with a sadness she couldn't disguise. "But what if they're not all like that? What if there are Xy'lar who are good, who are just trying to survive?" "A good parasite is still a parasite," General Kuznetsov said, his voice devoid of emotion. "They're all the same. They're all threats." Chloe knew she couldn't win this argument, not with a general. He was too far gone, blinded by rage and a thirst for vengeance. She knew that the Xy'lar had done terrible things, but was extermination the only answer? The Xy'lar ship, its desperate escape a desperate dance of dying technology, was nearing the dimensional rift, a swirling vortex of energy that promised escape or annihilation. The Xy'lar general, his hopes fading with every second, knew they were facing the ultimate price for their arrogance. And as the Xy'lar fleet disappeared into the rift, Chloe knew that the war was far from over. The battle for the future of humanity, for the soul of their species, was just beginning. She looked out at the wreckage of the Xy'lar fleet, a grim tableau of victory and destruction, and knew that the cost of this war would be felt for generations to come. The sky above Earth resembled a canvas of fire. Flames erupted from the celestial harbinger, the once imposing alien vessel now a crippled behemoth. The Xy'lar's desperate attempts to regain control of their technology only made the situation worse, each attempt backfiring in a burst of searing plasma. The weapon, Anya's creation, was a masterpiece of destruction and a horrifying testament to the depths of human ingenuity. Chloe watched from the safety of a fortified bunker, her face etched with a mixture of awe and terror. The battle, which had raged for days, had taken a turn so unexpected, so drastic, that it seemed almost unreal. The Xy'lar, once confident in their technological superiority, were now reduced to desperate, panicked creatures. Fear, a palpable entity, hung heavy in the air, choking the bunker's stale atmosphere. "They're losing," General Kuznetsov said, his voice tight with tension. He stood beside Chloe, his weathered face a roadmap of the war's toll. His eyes, usually shining with steely resolve, were clouded with a weariness that reflected the exhaustion of countless sleepless nights and the weight of countless lives lost. "It's working," Chloe whispered, her voice hoarse from days of barely speaking. She could barely comprehend the enormity of what was unfolding before her eyes. The Xy'lar, the beings who had stolen her beloved Sparky, were being brought low by the ingenuity of a woman named Anya, a woman who had been ostracized and ridiculed for her unorthodox ideas. It was a kind of cosmic justice, a twisted echo of the very thing she had longed for. Yet, a flicker of doubt lingered in the depths of her heart. The Xy'lar were not invincible, not any longer, but they weren't defeated yet either. A strange, creeping dread settled within her, a primal fear of the unknown that whispered of potential ramifications. The bunker's door hissed open, and Anya Petrova stepped inside, her eyes radiating a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had spent countless hours hunched over her workbench, her mind a whirlwind of calculations and equations. She had wrestled with ethical demons, questioning the very nature of her creation. Yet, she had pressed on, driven by a fierce sense of justice and a deep-seated understanding of the Xy'lar's threat. "The weapon is holding," she announced, her voice raspy. "It's weakening their defenses, fracturing their technology. They're panicking, but they're not giving up." Anya's words hung heavy in the air. Their victory was not assured. The Xy'lar were a formidable foe, and even in their weakened state, they remained capable of inflicting unimaginable horrors. "They're retreating," General Kuznetsov said, his eyes glued to the surveillance screens, analyzing the Xy'lar's erratic movements. "To their ship. They're trying to escape." A chorus of gasps rippled through the bunker. Escape. The word echoed in Chloe's mind, a chilling reminder of their vulnerability. If the Xy'lar managed to flee, they could regroup, return with reinforcements, and unleash their wrath on Earth with renewed ferocity. "We can't let them escape," Anya declared, her gaze sharp as she scanned the chaotic scene on the screens. "They'll come back. They have to be stopped." "What are you suggesting, Dr. Petrova?" General Kuznetsov asked, his voice laced with a sliver of hope. "What can we do to prevent them from escaping?" Anya paused, her expression grave. "We need to use the weapon one last time," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to cripple their ship." A wave of unease swept through the bunker. To target the celestial harbinger with Anya's weapon, to cripple it, was a dangerous gamble. It could destroy the ship entirely, unleashing a cascade of unpredictable consequences. But it could also be the only way to ensure humanity's safety. Chloe stared at Anya, her face pale. The idea, so terrifying yet so necessary, felt heavy on her heart. She had witnessed firsthand the Xy'lar's brutality, the senseless destruction they had wrought. But the thought of unleashing such a powerful weapon, of potentially causing collateral damage, filled her with a cold, creeping dread. "It has to be done," Anya said, her voice firm, her eyes unwavering. "We can't afford to let them return." General Kuznetsov nodded, his expression grim. "It's a risky move," he acknowledged, his voice thick with the weight of his command. "But it's our only option." The decision had been made. The weapon was to be used again, this time to cripple the Xy'lar's ship and prevent them from escaping. As Anya prepared the weapon, Chloe felt a strange mixture of emotions, a surge of hope that the Xy'lar would be defeated, an apprehension about the potential consequences, and a profound sense of gratitude for the woman who was risking her life to protect humanity. In the tense silence of the bunker, Chloe looked at the terrified faces of the soldiers, the scientists, and the civilians. She saw a reflection of her own fear and uncertainty, but she also saw a flicker of defiance, a glimmer of hope that had stubbornly refused to be extinguished. Anya's weapon was a gamble, a desperate act of defiance, but it was also a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of human resilience and a testament to the unwavering human desire to survive. And as the weapon was activated, a brilliant beam of energy slicing through the sky to strike the celestial harbinger, Chloe knew that the fate of humanity hung in the balance, a precarious dance between hope and despair. The outcome was unknown. But for now, at least, the Xy'lar were retreating. And for the first time in a long time, Chloe felt a flicker of optimism, a sliver of faith that maybe, just maybe, humanity had a chance. The air crackled with the remnants of energy blasts and the acrid stench of burning metal. The Xy'lar's flagship, a leviathan of obsidian and emerald, hung in the sky like a bruised eye, its once pristine hull now pockmarked and scarred. Smoke billowed from ruptured vents, and the rhythmic hum of its engines had died to a feeble rattle. Chloe stood on the charred remains of a once bustling city square, a cityscape reduced to a graveyard of twisted steel and concrete. The remnants of the Xy'lar's forces, battered and demoralized, retreated back to their flagship, their once confident swagger replaced by a panicked scramble. General Kuznetsov, his face grim with exhaustion, stood beside Chloe, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. The young girl, though still pale and trembling, held her head high, her eyes blazing with a fierce defiance that had become her trademark. The sight of the Xy'lar fleeing, their once unassailable technology in disarray, brought a spark of hope to her eyes. "Did we do it?" Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible above the din of the receding battle. Kuznetsov nodded, his voice rough with emotion. "We did. Anya's weapon, it worked beyond our wildest expectations." The general, despite his hardened military persona, was visibly shaken by the events of the past few days. The sight of the Xy'lar, the creatures who had murdered Sparky, fleeing in terror, brought a sense of catharsis, but it was tinged with the bitter taste of the cost it had taken. Across the battlefield, the human forces were celebrating. The roar of their victory echoed across the devastated landscape, a symphony of relief and defiance. Soldiers cheered, embraced one another, and fired celebratory rounds into the air. The sense of triumph was palpable, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. But the victory was bittersweet. The carnage was immense. The landscape was littered with the bodies of fallen Xy'lar and humans alike, a chilling reminder of the true cost of war. Chloe, her gaze fixed on the retreating Xy'lar, felt a pang of guilt mixed with her elation. She had wanted vengeance for Sparky, but this was not the victory she had envisioned. "They're retreating," Chloe said, her voice tight with a mixture of relief and anger. "But they won't get away with this. They'll face justice for what they did." Kuznetsov, his gaze fixed on the retreating Xy'lar, nodded silently. He knew that their retreat was only a temporary reprieve, a mere pause in the ongoing struggle. The Xy'lar had been wounded, but they were not defeated. The general's focus shifted to the retreating Xy'lar's flagship, the Celestial Harbinger, a behemoth of a ship that had once seemed invincible. The sight of its damaged hull, its engines sputtering, brought a grim satisfaction to his heart, but it also sparked a nagging sense of unease. He knew that the Xy'lar were only retreating, not surrendering. "They're heading back to their homeworld," Kuznetsov said, his voice low and measured. "We have to know what they're capable of, what to expect." Chloe's face tightened. The thought of the Xy'lar regrouping on their homeworld, plotting their revenge, filled her with dread. But she also knew that they could not simply stand by and allow the Xy'lar to regroup. They had to strike while the iron was hot. "We can't let them get away with this," Chloe said, her voice firm with the resolve of a seasoned warrior. "We have to go after them." Kuznetsov nodded, his gaze steeling. He knew that the Xy'lar were a threat not only to Earth, but to the entire galaxy. He could not allow them to recover, to rebuild, to threaten other worlds. He had to find a way to end this threat once and for all. "We need to be sure," Kuznetsov said, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision he was about to make. "We can't afford to let any of them survive. We have to finish this." Chloe knew that his words were blunt, harsh, but she understood the necessity of what he was saying. The Xy'lar had proven themselves to be a cruel and ruthless enemy, a threat to everything that humanity stood for. They had to be eradicated before they could unleash their tyranny upon the galaxy. As the Xy'lar flagship disappeared into the swirling vortex of the wormhole, Chloe felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that they were not finished with the Xy'lar. The fight was far from over. But for now, for a brief moment, There was only the faint glimmer of hope in the aftermath of a hard-won victory. The war, though still ongoing, had taken a turn. Humanity, bruised but unbroken, had defied the odds and found a way to fight back. The Xy'lar, once seemingly invincible, were now vulnerable. The future, though uncertain, felt a little brighter, a little less bleak. But the victory tasted bittersweet. As Chloe and Kuznetsov watched the Xy'lar disappear into the wormhole, they both knew that the true battle was just beginning. The fate of the galaxy, the future of humanity, now rested on the decision they were about to make. A decision that would forever alter the course of history. The Xy'lar might have retreated, but their homeworld, their arrogance, and their thirst for conquest remained. And as Chloe watched the last of the Xy'lar ships disappear into the swirling vortex of the wormhole, she knew that she and the other survivors would have to face the consequences of their actions, the burden of their victory. The stench of burning flesh and metal hung heavy in the air, a macabre perfume clinging to the remnants of a battle fought and won. The once pristine concrete of the city lay shattered, pockmarked with craters and twisted metal that once housed the Xy'lar's imposing dreadnoughts. Humanity had pulled off the impossible, but the victory felt hollow. Chloe stood amidst the devastation, clutching Sparky's worn leash in her hand. Her eyes, once filled with youthful innocence, now held a grim weariness. The battle had been won, but the scars of war ran deep. She stared at the charred remains of a Xy'lar, a grotesque mockery of life, its chitinous exoskeleton melted and warped. A wave of nausea washed over her, but she swallowed it down, forcing herself to face the reality of what had happened. Around her, survivors shuffled through the wreckage, their faces etched with grief and exhaustion. A woman choked back a sob as she knelt beside her fallen husband, a medic's tag still pinned to his uniform. A young boy, barely 10, clutched a teddy bear, his eyes wide with terror, staring at the bodies strewn around him. The air thrummed with a strange, unsettling silence. The Xy'lar had retreated, their once mighty fleet scattering, fleeing from the weapon that had turned their chitinous armor into a liability. A victory, yes, but one that came at a horrific price. Dr. Petrova, her face pale but determined, stood beside Chloe, her gaze sweeping over the ravaged landscape. She had won the respect of the world with her weapon, but the victory came at a cost. She had seen the horror firsthand, the way the Xy'lar's armor melted and sizzled under the weapon's influence, leaving behind a horrific testament to its brutal efficiency. "It's over," Dr. Petrova said, her voice trembling slightly. "We've won." But her words felt hollow, unable to penetrate the deep-seated sorrow that weighed heavily on Chloe's heart. "At what cost?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Dr. Petrova's eyes flickered with pain. She knew the answer. The cost had been immense. Lives lost, cities decimated, a world forever scarred by the Xy'lar's invasion. But she also knew that the Xy'lar had shown no mercy, their initial act of brutality against Sparky, a chilling testament to their cold-heartedness. The silence was broken by the roar of approaching jets, a formation of fighter planes returning from a final sweep of the Xy'lar battlefields. Their arrival was met with a wave of relief, a flicker of hope in the gloom. The enemy had been routed, their fleet fleeing into the unknown, but the victory felt incomplete. General Kuznetsov emerged from the cockpit of the lead fighter, his face grim. He had fought alongside Chloe and Dr. Petrova, witnessed the brutality of the Xy'lar, and felt the weight of responsibility for the decisions that had led them to this point. "They're gone," he said, his voice strained, "for now. But the war is far from over." He looked at Dr. Petrova, his gaze conveying a silent question. The weapon had saved them, but it had also opened a Pandora's box. The Xy'lar had retreated, their homeworld now vulnerable, ripe for the taking. Dr. Petrova met his gaze, her own eyes reflecting the same question. The weapon could be used again, to strike at the heart of the Xy'lar civilization, to ensure they never threatened humanity again. But she knew the ethical implications, the potential for a cycle of violence that could consume them all. Chloe, despite her grief, understood the unspoken conversation. She saw the anger in the eyes of the survivors, the desire for retribution. She knew they wouldn't be content with a simple retreat. They wanted justice, they wanted the Xy'lar to pay for their crimes. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling, but a new resolve hardening her young features. The Xy'lar had taken Sparky, and they had taken something from her, something precious and innocent. But in his memory, she had found a new strength, a new purpose. She was no longer just a girl who lost her puppy. She was a survivor, a symbol of resistance, and she would stand with her people, even if it meant facing the darkness. The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the consequences. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over, and the choices that lay ahead would decide not only the fate of humanity, but the future of their world. The silence after the Xy'lar retreat was heavy, thick with the smell of burning metal and the acrid tang of ozone. It was a silence broken only by the ragged breaths of survivors and the mournful whine of wind through the twisted metal skeletons of what were once Xy'lar ships. Chloe, her face streaked with tears and grime, stood amidst the devastation. The battle had been a blur of explosions, laser fire, and the screams of dying men and women. She had seen things that would haunt her forever, witnessed the cold, calculating cruelty of the Xy'lar and the desperate courage of humans fighting for their lives. Her gaze drifted towards the shattered remains of the Celestial Harbinger, the monstrous alien vessel that had arrived with promises of guidance and instead ushered in an era of destruction. It was a monument to Xy'lar arrogance, a testament to their hubris. Anya Petrova approached her, her face strained, eyes reflecting the same mixture of exhaustion and defiance that Chloe felt. In her hand, she held a small, metallic device, radiating a faint blue glow. It was the culmination of her years of research, the weapon that had defied all odds and saved humanity from annihilation. "Chloe," Anya said, her voice hoarse, "I need to speak with you, with everyone." Chloe nodded, her throat too tight for words. Anya walked to the makeshift stage, the remains of a destroyed Xy'lar transport, and addressed the gathering crowds. In the aftermath of the battle, humanity stood united, a tapestry of different faces, cultures, and religions, woven together by a shared experience of loss and a burning need for justice. "We have won, but at a terrible cost," Anya began, her voice amplified by a repurposed Xy'lar communication device. "We have driven back the Xy'lar, but their threat remains. They are a species fueled by pride, by a belief in their own superiority. We cannot allow them to regroup, to rebuild, and to come back for us." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. The sight of the Xy'lar fleet, decimated but not destroyed, was a constant reminder of the danger they faced. "I have developed a weapon that can exploit their weaknesses," Anya continued, holding up the device. "It can disrupt their technology, their very biology, on a global scale. We can use it to burn their world, to ensure they never threaten us again." A hush fell over the crowd. The ramifications of Anya's words were staggering. To destroy another world, to eradicate an entire species, was a decision fraught with ethical complexities. Chloe felt a knot of unease tighten in her stomach. She understood the logic behind Anya's proposal, the need to ensure human survival, but the thought of burning a whole world, of extinguishing a species, filled her with a profound sense of unease. "It's a terrible choice, I know," Anya went on, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. "But it's a choice we have to make. We have tasted the Xy'lar's cruelty, their arrogance. We know what they are capable of. We must act before they have a chance to recover, to rebuild their power." Anya's words sparked a debate that would echo through the years. Many, fueled by a deep-seated anger and thirst for vengeance, supported Anya's plan. They saw the burning of the Xy'lar world as a necessary evil, a price to pay for the lives lost, for the suffering endured. Others, however, hesitated. They saw the Xy'lar as a cautionary tale, a reminder of humanity's own potential for cruelty and the dangers of unchecked ambition. They argued for a more measured response, for diplomacy, for understanding. The debate was passionate, fueled by grief, rage, fear, and the weight of a choice that would define the future of humanity. Chloe, caught between the desire for justice and the fear of repeating the Xy'lar's mistakes, found herself torn between the two opposing viewpoints. General Kuznetsov, his face grim, stepped forward. "We can't afford to be sentimental, comrades. The Xy'lar are a threat to our very existence. They are a cancer on the galaxy. We must act now, and we must act decisively." The crowd roared its agreement. The tide of opinions seemed to be shifting towards Anya's plan. Chloe felt a chill run down her spine. The decision was almost upon them. The fate of an entire world rested on the shoulders of humanity. The weight of that responsibility, the realization that they, the survivors of the Xy'lar attack, were now responsible for the fate of another species, was almost unbearable. As the debate raged on, Chloe looked towards the ruined remains of the celestial harbinger, a black, jagged scar against the swirling clouds, a reminder of the darkness that had threatened to engulf them. She knew, deep down, that there would be no easy answers, no perfect solution. The choice before humanity was a terrible one, a choice that would forever stain the soul of their species. But they were the ones who had survived, the ones who had faced the Xy'lar, and now it was their burden to bear. The burden to choose. The news of the Xy'lar's retreat had spread like wildfire, igniting a wave of relief across the globe. People emerged from their shelters, their faces haggard, but their eyes filled with a newfound hope. Cities, once desolate and silent, began to buzz with the sound of rebuilding. The human spirit, battered but not broken, had prevailed. But amidst the celebrations, a chilling realization crept in. The Xy'lar were not gone. They were merely wounded, their pride bruised, their technology crippled, and their homeworld, once a fortress of unimaginable power, was now vulnerable. The debate, quiet and simmering in the aftermath of the battle, had reached a fever pitch. The scientist, Anya Petrova, stood before the United Nations Assembly, her eyes reflecting the weight of the decision that rested on humanity's shoulders. Her weapon, the bane of the Xy'lar's existence, could now be turned against their homeworld. The potential for a decisive victory was undeniable, but so were the ethical implications. "We are not savages," Dr. Petrova began, her voice ringing clear in the cavernous hall. "We are not monsters, but we are also not lambs to the slaughter. The Xy'lar attacked our world, murdered our people, and destroyed our lives. We are not obligated to show them mercy." Her words were met with thunderous applause. The room erupted in cheers, a collective sigh of relief from those who had witnessed the horrors inflicted by the Xy'lar. But a small, dissenting voice resonated through the clamor. General Ivan Kuznetsov, his face etched with the scars of war, stood up. "Anya, this is not a matter of revenge. We are dealing with an entire civilization, a world teeming with life. What gives us the right to decide their fate?" Anya met his gaze, her eyes burning with a fierce intelligence. "They showed us no mercy, General. They attacked our planet, killed our children. We are only returning the favor." "But at what cost?" General Kuznetsov countered, his voice shaking with the weight of his words. "There will be casualties, Anya. Innocent lives will be lost. And what message will we send to the universe? This is not justice. This is barbarism." The debate raged on. Arguments for and against the destruction of the Xy'lar's homeworld were thrown back and forth like weapons in a verbal battle. The lines were blurred, the consequences far-reaching. The decision was not simply about victory or revenge. It was about the very essence of humanity, the line between justice and barbarism, and the burden of choice. Chloe, sitting in the gallery, watched the debate unfold with a mixture of fear and fascination. The world she knew was gone, replaced by a landscape of war and uncertainty. The death of Sparky, once a symbol of innocence, had become a brutal reminder of the Xy'lar's cruelty. The sight of the Xy'lar ships retreating, their once imposing silhouettes now bruised and battered, filled her with a strange mix of triumph and sorrow. As the debate reached its climax, a profound understanding washed over her. This was not a game of vengeance, it was a choice that would define humanity's future. "It is a risk," Dr. Petrova conceded, her voice softer now. "A risk that could have unforeseen consequences. But standing here, looking at the faces of the survivors, I know one thing. We cannot let the Xy'lar stand unchallenged. We cannot let them rise again." Her words resonated with a chilling truth. The decision rested on humanity's shoulders, a heavy burden they would carry for generations to come. The air thrummed with a strange, electric tension, a heavy silence, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the colossal war machine, hung over the command center. A sea of faces, etched with a mixture of dread and steely resolve, turned towards the holographic projection of the Xy'lar homeworld. It was a vibrant, pulsing sphere, a breathtaking testament to a civilization they now sought to extinguish. General Kuznetsov, his face grim, paced back and forth behind the holographic image. The weight of 1,000,000 lives rested upon his shoulders, the burden of a decision that would forever alter the course of human history. He stopped, his gaze fixed on the flickering image, a silent prayer for a solution that wouldn't stain their souls. "General," Dr. Petrova's voice cut through the silence, her usually vibrant eyes shadowed with a weary exhaustion. "The calculations are complete. The weapon is primed and ready to fire." A collective gasp rippled through the assembled officers and scientists, a mixture of fear and desperate hope echoing in the air. Their faces, normally lit with the flickering glow of monitors, were now bathed in the cold, stark light of the holographic display. "The Xy'lar are a blight on this universe," Kuznetsov finally spoke, his words echoing with a quiet conviction. "Their arrogance, their brutality, it has brought us to this point. We cannot allow them to spread their poison any further." A wave of murmurs rippled through the room, each murmur a silent echo of the collective grief, the shared fury that had driven them to this point. The Xy'lar had taken from them their innocence, their peace, and most cruelly, their hope. Now they stood on the precipice, poised to unleash a firestorm of their own. "The weapon is unstable," Petrova continued, her words measured, deliberate. "We can't guarantee its effects. There's a chance it could unleash a chain reaction, tearing the fabric of space itself." Her words hung heavy in the air. The risk was immense, the potential for catastrophic consequences terrifyingly real. But even as fear gnawed at their hearts, a cold determination settled in the room. The Xy'lar had shown them the meaning of fear. They had tasted the bitterness of despair. Now they would offer the Xy'lar the same bitter cup. "Then we take the risk," Kuznetsov declared, his voice firm. "We have no choice. We cannot allow them to exist." A collective sigh washed over the room, a release of anxiety that mingled with the grim acceptance of their fate. The weight of the decision, the impending doom of a civilization, settled upon them like a suffocating blanket. "Their arrogance," a voice whispered from the back of the room, "their cold disregard for life, they deserved this. This is not about revenge, it's about justice." The words echoed amidst the murmur of agreement, resonating with the unspoken thoughts that plagued them all. The Xy'lar had taken everything, leaving them scarred and broken. Now they would offer them the same measure, a pyre of retribution, a final act of desolation in the face of unimaginable loss. The tension in the room built like a pressure cooker, simmering with raw emotion and the agonizing weight of their decision. Then Kuznetsov raised his hand, silencing the room. His face was a mask of stoicism, his eyes reflecting the icy calm of a man forced to make an impossible choice. "Fire the weapon," he commanded, his voice echoing with a chilling finality. The air crackled with a surge of energy, the hum of the weapon intensifying, morphing into a deep, ominous thrum. A flickering blue light pulsed from the heart of the machine, searing the holographic image of the Xy'lar homeworld, as if the world itself was crying out in agony. The officers and scientists watched in stunned silence, their breath caught in their throats as the weapon unleashed its destructive power. A dazzling, swirling vortex of energy lanced through the void, a cosmic harbinger of destruction, ripping through the fabric of space and time. The image of the Xy'lar homeworld, once vibrant and pulsating with life, twisted and contorted, a vibrant blue orb gradually consumed by an expanding inferno of white-hot energy. The light intensified, growing brighter, hotter, until it filled their vision, bleaching everything else into an abyss of white. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded, leaving behind a vast, echoing silence. The holographic image flickered, then died, leaving them staring at the cold, dark void where a civilization had once thrived. Silence reigned once again in the command center, a silence thick with the weight of their actions, a silence filled with the lingering echoes of the destruction they had wrought. Their faces, bathed in the cold, blue light of the monitors, mirrored the bleak emptiness of the void they had created. A profound sense of loss, tinged with a bitter relief, washed over them. They had exacted their revenge, but at what cost? They had brought an end to the Xy'lar, but in doing so, they had condemned themselves to a future haunted by the ghosts of their actions. The Xy'lar homeworld, a burning pyre in the cosmic sky, a testament to their wrath, stood as a grim reminder of the price of retribution. The war was over, but within their hearts, a new battle raged. A battle for redemption, for forgiveness, for a future they had yet to define. The sky above New York City was an apocalyptic canvas painted with streaks of fire and smoke. Buildings, once symbols of human ambition, now stood skeletal, their steel frames twisted like charred bones against the backdrop of a crimson sun. The air crackled with energy, laced with the acrid bite of burning ozone and the metallic tang of exploded weapons. This was the crucible of humanity's defiance, a battleground where dreams and nightmares collided. Dr. Anya Petrova, her face streaked with soot and sweat, watched from the vantage point of a shattered skyscraper. Her heart pounded against her ribs, a harsh counterpoint to the thunderous roar of the Xy'lar's failing technology. The weapon she had birthed, the very weapon she had spent years ostracized and ridiculed for, was tearing apart the alien invaders. The once imposing Xy'lar ships, with their sleek, chitinous exteriors, now bore the scars of her invention. Their once precise movements were erratic, their weapons firing erratically, their metallic husks emitting a mournful symphony of strained groans and sparks. The Xy'lar, once a force of overwhelming power, were now vulnerable, their pride and arrogance shattered. Below, the battle raged. Human soldiers, a motley crew of soldiers, scientists, and even civilians, fought with a ferocity born of desperation and righteous anger. They wielded makeshift weapons, repurposed tools of war, and whatever they could scavenge from the ruins, each attack a testament to their unwavering resolve. Chloe, her face grim, her eyes burning with a fire that mirrored the city around her, led a small group of resistance fighters. She hurled a Molotov cocktail at a Xy'lar patrol, sending a wave of orange flames towards the chitinous invaders. The Xy'lar shrieked in pain as their exoskeletons melted under the searing heat, their movements becoming clumsy and erratic. The Xy'lar general, his face contorted in a mask of rage and disbelief, watched from the wreckage of his flagship. His once perfect chitinous armor was pockmarked and cracked, his 8 limbs moving with a labored awkwardness. He had never envisioned humanity as a threat, regarding them as primitive, insignificant creatures. But their defiance, their tenacious spirit, had proven him wrong. Anya tightened her grip on the railing, her eyes fixed on the Xy'lar general. His rage fueled her own, a potent mix of sorrow for the innocent lives lost and a cold determination to see the Xy'lar eradicated. She didn't care that her weapon was inflicting pain, that it was tearing apart the fabric of their world. They had killed Sparky, a small, innocent being, and their actions had sparked a fire within humanity that no amount of force could subdue. The Xy'lar, facing a tide of human defiance and the crippling effects of Anya's weapon, began a retreat. They scrambled onto the remaining ships, their movements chaotic and desperate. The air vibrated with the mournful whine of their engines as they powered away from the Earth, leaving behind a trail of debris and the stench of burnt flesh. Anya watched as the last Xy'lar ship disappeared into the smoke-laden skies. A strange, hollow feeling filled her. The victory, so hard-fought and long-awaited, felt bittersweet, stained by the blood of so many innocents. She had seen too much death, too much destruction. Was she truly the savior humanity needed, or just another architect of destruction? As the smoke cleared and the battle cries faded into an eerie silence, Anya looked at the city around her. The ruins were a testament to the cost of humanity's rage. Chloe, her face pale, but her eyes filled with a steely resolve, approached Anya. "They're gone," Chloe said, her voice trembling. "They're finally gone." Anya nodded, her gaze fixed on the wreckage of the city. "For now," she whispered. But their battle was far from over. The Xy'lar might be vanquished from Earth, but their homeworld, their vulnerability, was a siren song whispering in the minds of a humanity now fueled by a terrifying new kind of power. The ashes of vengeance were still smoldering, and the flames of retribution were just beginning to lick at the edges of a new, dark horizon. The silence was deafening. Not the kind of silence that follows a storm, but the silence that comes after a world has been extinguished. The Xy'lar homeworld, once a vibrant tapestry of life and technology, now hung in the void like a blackened, broken star. The weapon, a beacon of human ingenuity and desperation, had done its work. Chloe stood on the observation deck of the Galatea, the flagship of the human fleet, staring at the smoldering ruin. The air was thick with a smell of burnt ozone and something else, something she couldn't quite place, something that evoked memories of Sparky's burnt fur. Her face, still etched with the scars of the battle, remained expressionless, her eyes hollowed out by the weight of what they had witnessed. The Xy'lar had been vanquished, their arrogance and aggression consumed by the very technology they had used to dominate. But the victory tasted like ash in Chloe's mouth. The sight of the Xy'lar homeworld, their entire civilization consumed by the weapon, had left an unfillable void in her heart. "It's over, Chloe," General Kuznetsov said, placing a hand on her shoulder. His voice, usually booming and authoritative, was subdued now, tinged with a weariness that mirrored her own. He, too, had witnessed the destruction, the immense cost of their victory. Chloe turned to him, her eyes red-rimmed. "But at what cost, General?" she whispered, her voice barely a murmur. "How many innocents died on that world? Were they all like the ones who killed Sparky?" Kuznetsov sighed, unable to offer any solace. He knew the question was rhetorical, a reflection of the overwhelming guilt that was consuming her. The Xy'lar general, the one who had ordered the shooting of Sparky, had been killed in the final battle, along with countless others who had been caught in the crossfire of their own hubris. The Galatea's comms crackled to life. A young officer, his face pale under the flickering light, announced, "General, we're receiving a transmission from the Earth Federation Council." Kuznetsov turned back to Chloe, his expression grim. "They'll want to know what we've done, Chloe. They'll want to know if we've brought peace or just traded one war for another." The transmission arrived, a stark image of the Xy'lar homeworld filling the screen. The council members, faces etched with a mix of horror and relief, awaited the report. Chloe felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. This was their legacy, the ashes of a world that had been extinguished in the name of revenge. She had become a symbol of hope, of human resilience, but now she felt like a harbinger of destruction. Kuznetsov turned to the camera, his voice firm despite the turmoil within him. "The Xy'lar threat has been neutralized. Their world, their technology, no longer pose a threat to Earth. We have secured our planet." The council members nodded, relief washing over their faces. They had anticipated the worst, but the victory, however brutal, was a relief. "But at what cost, General?" Chloe whispered again, the question echoing in her mind long after the transmission ended. The Galatea journeyed back to Earth, a ghost ship carrying the weight of a world's destruction. Chloe stared at the stars, each one a cold, unblinking eye, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the fragility of life. The war was over, but the questions lingered. What would become of humanity? Would they learn from the ashes, from the destruction of the Xy'lar, and the price they had paid to achieve victory? The answer, Chloe knew, was not as simple as destroying a planet. It lay within each human heart, in the choices they made, in the legacy they would leave behind. She had lost Sparky, a small, innocent creature, and now an entire world had been consumed by the flames of vengeance. The cost of their victory was etched in her soul, a reminder that even in the darkness of war, there was always hope for a brighter future, but only if they chose it.